everybody, how you doing? If you can unmute, just let me know if you can do so.
Doing well.
How are you?
Good, good, good. So those of you that attended the review, did you find it helpful the other on Friday?
Yeah.
Okay,
Very
awesome.
much so, yeah.
Okay, terrific. Yeah, so in this one, what's the date of the testing that you, because last week you guys didn't have it, or 2 weeks ago, you didn't have that information. When are you guys testing?
We're
July
testing on
18th.
the 18th.
The 18th. Okay,
18th.
everyone? The 18th?
Mine's the 16th.
Okay, so, okay. Yeah, because we were planning a review for a week from today on the 16th. So what's so that obviously that's going to help. But if we can do, I'll speak to Jay. But if I can do another review on the 18th, like we did, you know, last Friday, would that? I mean, it would have to be a little bit later. Would that work for anybody?
The 18th, we're taking our test.
I'm sorry, the 12th. The 12th. This Friday. The 12th.
Oh, this Friday.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, that works.
Yeah,
So
that
I
works.
think the 12th and the 16th for those of you that can attend, that would work.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so the 12th would probably be probably like 12 to 2, and then so Friday, this coming Friday, 12 to 2, and then next Tuesday from 6:30 to 8:30, or 5:30 to 7:30 on your end.
Okay,
Does that work?
that works for me.
Okay, all right, because I'm going to let Jay know, you know, at the conclusion of tonight, and if we could work that out, then I'll you know, he'll be in touch to, you know, to confirm. Okay, he'll send you guys an email with the link. All right, he's actually off site right now for, I mean, it's okay. Yeah, he just texted me. He's he's at the IDEA convention, so which is cool. So all right, so that's what I'm gonna ask him for, is this Friday from 12 to 2, and then next Tuesday from 6:30 to 8:30.
Is that
Okay.
12 to 2 Eastern time or
That would be
Central?
right. That would be Eastern time. Right. So it would be 11 to 1. Does that work for you guys?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's for me. I don't know about others.
Okay. Yeah, I have clients. I'll be out, you know, if you know anything about Long Island, I'll be out in Southampton from 9:45 to, I won't get back until 11:30-ish. So that's what I'm saying, just to be safe, it would be New York time 12, which would be 11 o'clock your time. Okay.
Will they be sending out a recording of this one, most likely?
Oh, yeah. They'll, yeah, you'll get a recording of this tonight. You'll get a recording of all the reviews. So those of you that attended my review last Friday, we went up to question 53, and then I would start this Friday from 54, and we would get, excuse me, through to 110. And then what I could do the following Tuesday is just kind of go back to, well, this, depending on who's there, if you've already been through the full review, then we can kind of dive into the Quizlet cards. If any of you've looked at those, we can kind of work on those in a similar format. Okay.
All right.
Okay, great. All right, we have 100. No, well, after we do, I have the quiz that we're going to start with for lecture 4, and then we're going to end with the quiz for lecture 5. But in between, we probably have like 100 and I don't even know, 60, 65 slides to get to. So we better get to it. And tonight we're going to be talking about special population. So youth, older adults, pregnancy, disease, and then we'll conclude with theories, which, you know, those questions came up during the review on Friday, and then we'll end with some legal information, which we've kind of already talked about. So some of the slides I'm not going to dive deep into, but you know, because we've got to remember scope of study. We're not attorneys, we're not doctors, and we're not you know, psychoanalysts. So we'll try to keep that stuff in perspective. But it's good for you to have a basic understanding, so that in the event that you know, there are situations that arise for, you may decide at some point in your career that you want to go into, you know, the administrative or management end. So then it would be good to at least have some idea about it. So if you had to contact a professional, you would know what professional to contact. Okay, so but we'll, so we'll get into all of that. So, but in the meantime, what I'd like to start off with is the quiz from lecture 4. So we'll continue with the same format. 10 questions, go through these and let me know when you'd like me to advance to the next slide.
I'm ready for the next slide.
Okay, anybody need me to hold on for a second?
1 second.
Okay,
Okay, I'm good.
good. Okay, advancing.
I'm good.
Okay, anybody
Good.
else? Good? All right.
Good.
Anybody need another second? No? Okay, advancing.
No, I'm good.
Oh, sorry, did you need more time?
No, I'm good.
Okay, great.
I'm good.
Anybody else?
Good.
Good, all right, last slide.
Okay.
Anybody else good?
Good.
Right. Let me get the, give me 1 second, guys. 'Cause I could get to my, sorry. Just trying to get to my screen and the slideshow. All right, we'll do it this way. Okay, so let's go to question 1. You calculate that a 53-year-old male has a BMI of 23.4 kgs. This BMI would put him in the category of?
Overweight.
Correct, right. So this is just a matter of, knowing the ranges for each of the categories. Okay,
Mhm.
so correct. The answer is C. All right, bioelectrical impedance or BMI operates on the understanding that a small electrical current flows more easily through.
Muscle.
Right. B, muscle due to high water content. Okay.
Mhm.
All right, C. Regarding progression, it is generally best to focus on increasing blank before increasing blank.
Put A, but I don't know if that's right.
Yep, that's correct. So increase
Okay.
duration, and then duration or frequency, and then intensity. Okay, so, pretty much if you're working with a newbie, it may be different if you have somebody that's more seasoned, but especially, I think we talked about this 2 weeks ago. But yeah, it's always better to increase duration and frequency first, and then intensity last. Okay.
Okay.
The answer is A. For the average, apparently healthy sedentary person, an appropriate range of exercise intensity within which to begin is blank of heart rate reserve.
40 to 60.
Yeah, right. So, you got to remember here, we're talking about heart rate reserve. That's the HRRR. If you're talking about, using the Carboni method, which is you're just taking 220 minus your age times a percentage, then, we can talk about B, 60 to 80%. But for this question here, when we're discussing heart rate reserve, it would be 40 to 60%. And again, those ranges vary too if you're dealing with, a diseased population where the doctor might be suggesting other percent ranges. So you just need to keep this in mind. But the key point here, those of you that attended my review on Friday, we talked about looking at keywords, right? So right here we were talking about the apparently healthy but also sedentary person. Okay, so those are the keywords here to really focus on. Okay. All right. 5, it is estimated that a rating of perceived exertion, that's the RPE value range, using the scale of 6 to 20 of blank is a moderate intensity range.
I put down C.
Correct. 12. So we're talking about 6 to 20, right? There's also scale 1 to 10. So somewhere in the middle is going to be that moderate intensity range. Okay.
Mhm.
So correct. So that's C, 12 to 13. 6, which term refers to the maximum force a muscle or muscle group can generate at a specified velocity?
Power.
Power.
I can
Strength.
understand why you said that because of probably the term velocity might have thrown you, which is speed, right? So maybe that's where you came up with, but the actual answer, is somebody want to give me the correct answer?
It's strength.
It is
Yeah,
strength.
okay. And so the key, well, you tell me, what would be the key word that led you to think that strength was the correct answer?
I've just done these questions.
Velocity.
Say again?
Word
Maximum
velocity.
force.
So maximum force, right? But I
Yeah.
can understand completely why that question would have thrown you because of the speed when we're talking about velocity. But in this case, they had stated the maximum force of a muscle or muscle group. Okay, that can generate velocity. Okay, so that can generate. So we weren't saying about how much velocity, but just velocity in general in terms of the movement. Okay, so yeah, that's kind of the stuff that might throw you a little bit. So I don't think I mentioned this in the review on Friday, but they always recommend that you choose an answer, don't change it, right? Because often stats show that you change it to the wrong answer. But it never hurts to kind of, even maybe not answer till you reread the question and really, pick out the keywords. Okay, if that helps at all, I hope so. All right, 7, what principle of resistance training best represents the idea that training-induced adaptations are consistent with the stress placed upon the muscle or muscle group?
That's I can't even say it.
Specificity, right?
Yes,
Specificity.
thank you.
Yeah, so, whatever it is that person wants to train for, you got to make sure that the training mimics that particular, is specific to what it is that, the goal is, okay? But yes, that's correct. Okay, 8, which of the following is not, okay? Anytime you see anything like this, you got to really, key in on that. Is not true regarding intervertebral discs.
A. D.
What? Say again, what is it?
D.
D, right, discs are part of the posterior aspect of the motion. We actually kind of talked about this posterior tilt, right? But yeah, that is the correct answer, D, okay?
Are the discs more in like the front of the spine?
No, they're
But where-
actually, I kind of look at them as like vertebral sandwiches, right? So you have,
Right.
if they move away from, go forward or anterior or posterior, or they can move side to side, now you have an issue. But yes, they should sit real nice between each vertebrae, okay? Okay, 9, posterior rotation of the pelvis is recommended for individuals with disc disease when engaging in abdominal strength training exercises. Definitely talked about this on Friday.
Mhm. Oh,
Remember just think about what we talked about in terms of what that posterior tilt is. So is this true or false?
False.
Correct.
D.
Correct. B, correct. Okay, and the last one, a structural curve can be removed by assuming a posture that takes away the force responsible for it.
False.
False.
Absolutely. You never want to take it. And I might have shared with you guys, if you remember or not, I'm not sure, but early on in my career, that's what they were telling me, push the back into the floor, and basically what I was asking all of the people that I was working with is to do a posterior tilt. And if I could stick my hand, under their back and get to their spine, they weren't down enough. For years, I did this until I learned better. Okay, so you always, we talked about normal curvatures of the spine. There's going to be variations of that depending on who you're working with, but you never want to force a curve. Okay, so basically the core muscles are there to support the spine and the natural curves, or the individual's natural curve of the spine, and you want to use the musculature to support that, not to take that curve away. Okay, so hopefully you'll know better than I when I was first learning. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about in terms of special populations, chapter 17, youth. All right, so they go on to define children, boys and girls who have not yet developed Secondary sex characteristics. Adolescence is a period between childhood and adulthood, which is generally between girls ranging 12 to 18 and boys from 14 to 18. Youth and pediatrics broadly defined to include children and adolescents, okay? So that's how you define what a youth is. Benefits of physical activity for youth. So it can definitely enhance their cardiovascular fitness, increase muscular strength, improve metabolic health. We did talk about that children tend to have a high percentage of body fat because of their development. Their muscular strength isn't at the point that it will be once they reach later stages of growth. But you take this opportunity to learn skills, make friends, have fun, feel good about accomplishments, okay? And we'll get into skills in a little bit if you decide that you want to work with this population. And let's just talk about that a second. Where do we fit in as personal trainers? Well, I'll tell you what I've done. I've worked at camps, okay, over the summer. Several different types of camps. I've worked at your typical day camp, but I was also involved. I had a client, it was a mother-daughter who ran, the daughter was a physical educator, not physical educator, a teacher, K through 12 teacher. And at their school, they ran a charter, at their church, they ran a charter school. So they would have me come in to do lessons in physical education. In the summer, I ran their camp. So there's definitely a lot of room for us in, with children when it comes to, day camps and, even sleepaway camps if you want to go that route. K through 12, then you're going to have to get your, based on your state, you're going to have to get your degree in education and then, go on to do the state certified, whatever is required for your state. So recommended physical activity, children and adolescents should accumulate at least an average of 60 minutes per day of moderate to vigorous physical activity. That's what MVPA means, moderate to vigorous physical activity across the week. Include both health and skill-related activities. So when we're talking about health-related, endurance, strength, and flexibility, skill-related, agility, balance, coordination, speed, power, reaction. So I'm no different than we already talked about with adults, right? In addition to physical education and recess, youth should have regular opportunities to be physically active before and after school. It's probably a little bit more challenging before school, especially during the school year, but, after school for sure. If, doesn't mean that every kid has to be involved in sports. But they should still be given the opportunity to have, for recreational sports. Not every kid has to be like it is today. I don't know how it is in Chicago, but certainly in New York and Long Island, from what I see, I mean, these kids are overloaded with, activities. I'll just take my nephew as an example. I mean, he lives in Brooklyn, but I remember one day I went with my sister and brother-in-law, and, we were morning doing flag football, and then I think the kid had all of an hour, and that was spent in the car driving him to his baseball game. So, that might be a little bit too much. And I did see it come out in him in terms of he became very focused on, the winning aspect of the game. So, maybe that's where you have to be the voice of reason. You may have the opportunity to work with your clients' kids. I remember a opportunity years ago where I still have these clients today, and this kid I'm about to tell you about is now a father of 2 or 3 kids, I'm not even sure, and a very successful, professional. But he was trying, I think he was either going to try out or had already made the soccer team and was sent home with a list of things that he needed to do over the summer to train. And I just remember my client, who was his mother, said, you think you can help my son with this? So I looked it over, and I said, okay, yeah, I think I could do this. And so I came up with a game plan and all, but I think he was all of maybe 8 or 9 years old at that point. I mean, it was crazy. So, but those are things that can become opportunities for you to make more money. Obviously, we want to reduce sedentary time, probably more so than ever. I think since I'm a kid, they've always said, kids have to be out doing. But when I was a kid, you know, we didn't have all this social media, these games and television like they have now. You know, so we make fun by, you know, at night playing tag, and, you know, by day we would, you know, throw sweatshirts on the ground to make bases, and, you know, but you don't see kids doing that anymore. I often smile when I see chalk on a driveway for hopscotch or whatever game they're playing, because you don't see that anymore. So the kids are you know, and I'm not saying that they're necessarily spending you know, I know that don't use me as, or don't, you know, come after me for this, but, you know, I do believe in technology, but, you know, I do feel like there's a social aspect that the kids may not get on social media, except that I have clients that have told me that their sons have made friends all over the world. And in fact, they never met, but they're going to each other's weddings. So, you know, how do you define social interaction? But more importantly is it's the sitting time, right? How are we going to get those kids up and moving rather than, you know, sitting playing a game? They have all of these, you know, devices now, you know, those goggles that you put on, and, you know, you could do certain things, but not without risk. People have like broken legs and arms and things like that. So, you know, there has to be a balance between the two, in other words. Okay, fundamental movement skills. So this is really interesting. When I was shared with you that I, you know, worked in a camp, I learned very quickly that there are skills that, you know, kids will learn inherently, but then there are skills that are not. And one of them is skipping. Okay, so you say, what's the big deal, right? So you will see that kids can gallop, but they don't know how to skip, and that means changing one leg after the other. Okay, so there are certain movement patterns or fundamental patterns that, you know, that you're going to have to teach kids, and it's better that they're taught at a young age, and then they'll learn how to continue with those movement patterns throughout life. But just so I got this right out of the book, so I don't remember the actual page, but it's in, what did I say, chapter 14. So fundamental movement skills are often referred to as the building blocks of human movement, right? The decline and disinterest in physical activity appears to emerge early in life, so somewhere between 6 and 8 years old. And it seems to be a consequence of kids not being active. So a requisite level of muscular strength is needed to run, to jump, to skip. And then weaker youth with poor fundamental movements skills may be less able or willing in some cases to engage in active play, particularly with peers that might you know, intimidate them on some level because they're faster. Okay, so basically the fundamental movement skills fall into 3 categories. We're talking about locomotive, object control, and stability. Now, this may not be something that falls under our scope of practice, but it may be something that if you do have the opportunity to work with children, as I mentioned, that there's always an opportunity to, you know, engage in a CEC course to, you know, for the credits that you're going to need to hold on to this certification once you pass the exams. So, but typically a lot of this stuff is taught in physical education. And there are, you know, state standards, so that if a child is in New York, if a child is in Chicago, if a child is in California, depending on the grade level, if you go from any state at, let's say, the 3rd grade level, they should, the teachers in the physical educators in those states should be teaching the students the same thing regardless of the state. So our job might be just to kind of fill in on that, okay, if you are involved in some sort of recreational program outside of the school, okay?
I do have a quick question really quick.
Sure.
Okay, so when we do pass this exam, do we have to test every year to keep our certification, or is there any mandates or CEUs we have to follow every year?
So the question I'm going to ask you, do you want to retake the test after you pass it?
Hell to the no.
Yeah, 100%. So I'm not sure about WITS, it might be every 2 years. In that 2-year period after you pass the exam, your certification will be valid for that time. And in that time, you have to acquire a certain amount of CECs, which WITS offers. But there are other organizations, because WITS is a accredited organization. If you take the CE, if you've accumulated several certifications, then any CECs that you take through WITS would be applied to, let's say, IDEA or ACE is the certification, ACSM, and vice versa. So you'll have to look into exactly how many credits that you're going to have to accumulate to maintain the certification. So as long as you complete those CECs and the continuing education courses and submit them before the expiration date, then your certification will not lapse. But once there may be a grace period, and then the fee might be a little bit higher, but there will be a point that if you let it lapse for too long, you'll have to retest.
Got it. And then
Okay.
I saw in regard to like like if we did a internship of 30 hours for free. So if we pass our test, would that be level 2 if we decide to do that?
Yeah, I totally recommend that, because now you're going to get the hands-on that you need, because right now you're learning. I mean, you have the lab part, which is awesome, and I think I shared that with you a couple
Yeah.
weeks ago, that it's one of the few certifications still that has that lab component. But by doing the internship, there's 2 benefits. One, you're going to learn, from the professionals at that site, but 2, the potential of getting offered a position.
Yeah, that would be great. And then we can use the certification in any state, right?
Yes, because it's a national. Yep, it's a national
Perfect.
certification. He's also in Canada too, so I have a feeling it might be
cool.
international on that level.
All right. Well, thank you.
Do you know where we could find more information about how many of those we will need in the future?
It should be, so you're probably going to receive information about that once you pass the exam, I would think. But otherwise, if you go onto the WITS site, they should have that information.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
another question.
Sure.
What is locomotive and object control?
Okay. Does anybody want to take that and explain it?
Yeah.
I'm trying to find it in my book.
Okay. So let's pull it apart. Locomotor. What would you think that is?
Something with like
Movement.
a
Movement.
wheel,
Anything with
movement.
movement. How
Okay.
about object control?
Object control?
Think about it. Take an object and use to control it. Give me an example.
A wheel.
Basketball. Any throwing a
Basketball,
ball.
yeah.
Okay. Bowling. Right.
Yeah. Bowling.
There has to be some control of that object. Right. And that also involves it develops hand-eye coordination, which is really important. And then what about stability?
That's
Gymnastics.
Yeah, right. You can find it in gymnastics. You can pretty
It's
much
like-
find it in any, right? If you have somebody that wants to become a pitcher, right, they have to learn how to transfer the force to the ball by maintaining their position, right, on the mound. So
Makes
that's
sense.
where stability and balance comes in. Okay, but good
Okay.
question.
Is stability and balance, are they different, or
I'm sorry, say that again. I didn't understand the question.
are stability and balance, are they different, or
No, I would pretty much say they're the same, because if
the
you
same?
even if you take it out of the context of children, if you have to maintain some sort of stability in order to maintain balance, right? So if a person is, just walking down the street, right? There has to be some sort of, again, locomotor. I don't think that they're, I think a lot of them have crossovers. I don't think that you can do one necessarily without the other, but if someone is even just walking down the street, crossing a sidewalk, all right, there has to be obviously some locomotor component, but then also some stability, especially stepping off the curb. If you take a senior, where they're not going to stumble and lose their balance as a result. Okay. Does that help?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, importance of muscular strength. Again, we're still talking about youth. Weaker youths are susceptible to a number of muscular issues in terms of and dysfunction. So we already talked about the fact that they're not as developed as they will be, when they become adult, when they become teenagers. But it's something that that definitely needs to be focused on, muscular strength, because it will help them in their, as they're developing, and then as they move into their teenage years and then adult years. So it's something that definitely should be focused on. If you do work, in a facility where they have, I know that some schools have, have more money for the ability to fund a gym specific with equipment for youth. So that would be awesome. You can also even move into like a strength coach, not necessarily coaching per se, but after school activities may require hiring a strength coach if they have the funding for it. So if you may have the opportunity to work in a school that has the funding, that has invested money in buying youth-specific equipment. They do make it. It just depends, on the district. But on the other hand, maybe there's some facilities out there that have that. I haven't been privileged to work in those environments, but I know that equipment is out there. So it's important that the youths learn how to engage in muscular activities that will improve their and enhance strength over the course of their formative years. All right, levels of muscular strength tend to remain relatively stable between childhood and mid-adulthood. So this is why it's good that we introduce this at an early age and try to teach them the right way to engage and improve their strength. Okay, so responses to exercise. So I'll just start on the left. It's going to result in a lower level of blood pressure, cardiac output, stroke volume, increase in heart rate, glycolytic capacity, minute ventilation, tidal volume, and respiratory rate. So tidal volume is the amount of air that is going to be moving, just like stroke volume is related to the amount of blood that moves in and out of the heart, or out of the heart, I should say. Tidal volume is the amount of air that moves out of the lungs. Okay, so when we're talking specifically with youth, this is the response that they will have to exercise. That's a little bit different than when they get older. So here is just effects or a comparison between children and adults. So children are lower in stroke volume, a smaller increase in cardiac output, blood pressure, tidal volume. So a lot of this is repetitive, but it's higher in submaximal heart rate at given intensities, maximal heart rate, respiratory rate at a given intensity, surface to body mass ratio, rate of intramuscular creatine phosphate resynthesis, and recovery from physical exertion. Okay, so so these are just some comparisons between children and adults. Benefits of regular physical activity in youth and children. So mental health, cognitive, a lot of this too is just across the board. It's not just related to children, but definitely there's an increase in self-esteem and academics. This is all research supported. Increase in cardiometabolic health, so insulin resistant and fat tissue. Increase resistance to injury because of neuromuscular adaptations. Increase in fat-free mass, right? That's everything other than fat. And then aerobic and anaerobic fitness because of endurance and sprints training. Fundamental movement skills increase because of locomotor object control, which we just talked about, and stability skills, and an increase in muscular fitness because of an increase in muscular strength, power, and endurance. So across the board, it's a win-win. So in impact on mental health and cognitive functioning, so we talked about moderate to vigorous physical activity. So low levels of MBPA during childhood and adolescence associated with worsened mental health and impairments in self-perception and physical and psychological well-being. Regular exposure to fitness programs with qualified instructors in a supportive setting can provide an opportunity for participants to make friends, overcome challenges and be more psychologically resilient, okay? And again, I don't think this is any different regardless of whether it's a child all the way through seniors, right? So there's enough studies out there to show that, engaging in regular exercise is going to definitely enhance mental health and cognitive function. And if you put that into and that's why I really believe that CrossFit, and any of those group training programs are so successful, mainly because of the social connection, more so than anything else. Okay, proficiency barrier without development of prerequisite movement skill proficiencies, the ability to perform more complex or specific skills during exercise and sports may be limited. So this is why it's so important. Teach the children those essential motor skills and object control and stability, and you're going to see that that's just going to build upon their abilities to be more successful as they age. So allocate time during exercise sessions for direct learning experience that target neuromuscular deficiencies with strength and skill building activities as part of a long-term approach to physical development. I think we might have mentioned this earlier on in one of our lectures, but I think all of you said that you were involved in school with the President's Council on Physical Fitness. I mean, this has been around for a long, long time, and it's been there. I think in the 70s it started, but they realized based on research that it is very important to develop these skills and introduce health and fitness to children earlier, because that's when they're like sponges. They just suck it up. And I shared with you that I work with physical educators, and that's where I believe that subject is probably one of the most important subjects in the school, because whatever they learn, whatever the teacher is teaching them, they have the ability now to take that home and affect however many family level members are in that house. So this is why I think it's so important. They come home enthusiastic. Hey, Mom, Dad, look what I learned today. And then before you know it, maybe the whole family is engaging in these activities. So it's extremely important. So program design. Certainly want to work with a qualified instructor, have a meaningful experience, positive social interactions. I don't know about when you guys were in school, but I know when I was in school, I still remember to this day, it always seemed that the kids that were less coordinated, let's put it that way, were always chosen last if we had to pick teams. I think that if I was working as a physical educator in the school system right now, I'd find a different way to organize teams, because it always drove me nuts that here's a line of people and you pick two captains, and then you always knew which kids were going to get picked first and which kids were going to get left behind. So that always drove me nuts. But it's just something I remember in my youth. So as a physical educator, if I were working in the schools, I would definitely find ways to choose teams so that those students who are less less skilled, for whatever the reasons. We don't know their background. We don't know why. I mean, here we are, 11th, 12th grade, and we're laughing at them for some reason, for whatever the reasons. But what, it wasn't their fault. Maybe the fault was on, the lack of attention that they should have received when they were in the younger grades, in the K through 6. So yeah, that's just a feeling of mine. So you want to balance quantitative aspects. So, we already talked about the 60 minutes per day of moderate to vigorous physical activity, with qualitative aspects, which is basically having fun, making friends, and making some time, for learning something new each time, so that they're motivated. Okay, so again, no different than adults, but there needs to be a balance of both. Okay, program design. Do not expect children to exercise in the same way as adults, right? Children tend to be intimately active and engage in spontaneous bouts of MVPA with varying intensities. Expose children to a variety of exercise and sports activities, and create a physical active environment that is enjoyable. Okay, so we're just basically repeating what we've been talking about. There's this concept in your book called FUN, F-U-N, Dementals Fitness. So it's integrating training designed to enhance both health and skill-related components of physical fitness. And again, meaningful instructions, deliberate practice, and technique-driven progression. So, again, some sort of, allow the student to understand what it is you're expecting them to do, or the child to expect, and then allow them to practice it. And then, you can direct them in a way that will allow them to progress in whatever skill it is that you're working on. Okay, and then this is basically all the components, interrelated components of the fundamentals. So aerobic activity, strength activities, and skill activities. Okay, so if you happen to have a conversation with a physical educator, see if they're doing all that stuff. All right, any questions on youth, guys? Because we're moving on to older adults. We're good? We're at 7:15. Okay, so what you're looking at here is number of people between the ages of 65 and older from 1900s up to 2060, which we haven't reached yet, but if we just look at 2019, the trend has been that, people are living longer. They've actually, changed what middle age used to be. I think there was a time probably in the 1900s, so probably we could see there even 1960, 1980. People didn't really live as long as, I think 40 back in the early 1900s was probably around the, the age that people lived to. But, there's a lot that's associated. We're not just talking about this being purely physical, because they were very physical. They worked in the fields. There was, the evolution of medicine and so on, and education, and a lot of it plays into this, okay? Okay, so older population, if we're defining them, it's anybody who's 65 and older. There's definitely an increasing number of older adults. I think I shared with you, I live in a 55 and older community, and one of the youngest by probably 10 years. And they're unbelievable. They play pickleball, and they play tennis, they play bocce ball. In fact, right now, there's a bocce ball tournament going on if I walked out my front door. So they do happy hour, they do kayaking, they have, there's a yacht club, such an active community. And this is why they flock to this community, because they like the activeness of the community. So a wide continuum of functionality, disease, process and limitation, not uniformly distributed, right? So, we'll see when we get into the disease part of this lecture, that there is a correlation between, a person's health and physical activity and the reduce of disease. We're going to talk about diabetes, but what comes to mind right now, I think it was yesterday I saw on the news that Ozempic, which is a drug that they use to combat diabetes, they've now seen it has a tremendous effect on a person's ability to decrease their weight. And people that have diabetes are typically obese, okay? I'm not making a blanket statement here, but there is an association with obesity and diabetes, but they've learned too that in watching, researching this population that have been on these diabetic drugs that reduce their risk for diabetes, it's also lowered, diabetes and obesity, it's also lowered the prevalence of cancer that's associated with obesity. There's 10 cancers that are linked with obesity, and they're seeing a decline in that through these drugs. For example, Ozempic. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Awesome. Is there side effects to that or something?
There are side effects to every drug that's out there. So but in this case, from what I've been watching and reading and listening to, it seems like the risk of obesity and diabetes outweighs any of the risks on those drugs. But yes, for sure, there's you can probably look it up right now on your phone, and there's probably a whole slew of side effects. But in this case, I think those side effects are minimal compared to the risks of cancer and diabetes associated with obesity. Okay, so so individuality and exercise program is essential. Yes, you know, I told you, don't be that cookie cutter trainer, no matter who you work with. Okay, you got to focus on that individual and what their needs are. Focus on preventing and reducing the progression of any chronic disease. Chronic disease is anything that's occurring, you know, day after day, you know, or throughout the day. Okay, so it's something that you know, they have that just doesn't go away. Okay, that's chronic. All right, aging. Historically, aging was a chronological concept, you know, but my dad always said, he goes, you're only as old as you feel, right? So it seems to have changed a little bit, not a little bit, a lot bit, but, you know, you can have, you know, two individuals who are 60, 70, 80, picks the age, you know, or any age, you know, for that matter. And we could probably all, you know, think about at least two people right now at the same age, and one you would perceive, you know, to be, even though chronologically they're the same age, one is perceived a lot older than somebody else who is not. I mean, I'm constantly told I'm about to be 60, and I don't want to say in a month, in 2 months. And, you know, my own student just told me last week, you don't look like you're over 40. I think she was being generous, but yeah. So, I mean, I have that gift in my family too. So we don't look our age, but you know, that whole chronological age has changed, you know, because of the way people are taking care of themselves. And it's really based on education, right? You know, people have learned more about how to do that. And so that's helped. Okay, aging and physical activity. Individual variances in aging patterns is based upon behavior, right? If you mistreat your body, you're going to be older than you appear, or than your chronological age. There are strong associations between regular physical activity and successful aging. What comes to mind when I read that bullet point, there's an ongoing study that was done, the Framingham study. It's out of Framingham, Massachusetts, and they noticed that people were living, you know, well into their 90s, fairly healthy. So they've been studying this population, and now it's the offsprings, in terms of what they, you know, why are they living so long. The other thing is, you might want to look it up, is National Geographic's teamed up with this individual, private group of individuals, and they were studying what's called the blue zones. I might have mentioned this, like 4 or 5 blue zones across the world. There is one here in the States. It's in California. Another one in Italy. I think it's China. You'd have to look this up. There's some TED Talks on it. And, you know, they researched what allows people to be older than 100 there. You know, some of it had to be spiritual. That was out of California. Some had to do with the physical work. In Italy, I think it was the wine and the cheese, believe it or not. But they continue to study these areas where they have large populations of people that live, you know, 90 plus, 100 plus, you know, in good condition. You know, we're not saying that they're not in nursing homes. They're still able to live independent lives. And so, you know, these are ongoing studies that they've been doing across the world. So 2020 profile of older Americans. There are more widows than widowers. So that means that there are more women that, you know, that are outlive men. Okay, the majority live with a spouse or a partner, although this decreases with age. Less than 30% rate their health as fair or poor. So that's pretty cool. 19% have difficulty with physical functioning or cannot function. Most have at least one chronic condition. Okay, and you know, that could be arthritis. It could be, you know, something insignificant, you know, compared to something that would be, you know, obviously more significant. Okay, physical activity limitations increase with age. So this is a list of limitations. So hypertension, 82% of men, 85% of women. So we're talking about high blood pressure here. Arthritis, 48%. Heart disease, 14%. Cancer, 25%. And diabetes, 29%. Okay, effects of aging on cardiorespiratory. Remember, we call it cardiorespiratory because we're talking about the cardiovascular and the respiratory system. So VO2 max declines steadily. This is just, when we're looking at this is just the effects of aging. And this is why it's so important that we need people to work out, because these decreases are going to occur regardless of whether somebody exercises or not. We're just trying to minimize the amount that is, going to inherently reduce. So the VO2 about 1% a year after the age of 20 in both men and women. Okay, so it starts that early. This rate is reduced by half in men maintaining vigorous activity. So this is what I was saying, we're just trying to get people to exercise to reduce the amount of decrease. Women appear to experience the 1% decline independent of activity status. So they're saying here that no matter what, if a woman exercises, they're still going to experience that 1% decline. Declines are relating to aging as well as to physical inactivity, emotional stressors, and unhealthy diet. What I teach my students at the college, which astounds me every time I go through this lecture, but I'll ask you guys, what do you think is the 4th leading cause of death worldwide?
Bad diet?
Cancer?
So you would think that, both right now, both of them, I mean, the answer is going to blow you away because, but bad diet, we could change that, right? Cancer, maybe so, maybe not. But think on the lines of everything we've been talking about.
Is it stress?
That definitely is up there, but it's not the 4th. So the 4th leading cause of death worldwide is physical inactivity. Okay.
That's what
It seems crazy, right? The number 1 cause of death here in the United States is heart, a cardiovascular disease. But just think worldwide, 4th leading cause of death is physical activity. And, that can be so easily reduced by people just going for a walk every day, right? Doesn't require any money, doesn't require any equipment, just go out and walk, okay? So it's pretty amazing. So that's what I thought of when I read that. Okay, effects of aging, cardiorespiratory fitness continued. VO2 max values of trained older subjects are similar to those of untrained subjects, several decades younger. Decline in VO2 can further reduce physical activity, which results in lower and lower levels of respiratory fitness. So it's never too late to start. If, it was funny because when I was, every time I review this, cardiorespiratory benefits, I think about, again, in this population, I see people all the time going out and exercising. And, it makes me think, is that something that they've always done, or is it something that they finally got, that there was just that light bulb that went off and said, geez, I'm not getting any younger, maybe I should start walking, So if they do nothing, the decline is pretty significant. If they do something, it's going to reduce that level of decline a little bit less. Okay, so everybody can benefit from exercise. So with cardiovascular fitness, there's going to be a decrease in heart rate, which we're hoping for, right? Maximal oxygen extraction is lower in less active adults. So that means that their efficiency, so if you really think about, aside from the reduction in heart rate, the heart doesn't work as hard, but also we want to make the body efficient at extracting. The oxygen is there. I think I talked about this in earlier workshops, earlier lectures, that at rest, the air is 21% oxygen. When we inhale and exhale, we're only using 5% at rest. So, there's ample oxygen available, and it's in the hemoglobin, it's on the red blood cells, right? But how efficient is the body at extracting it and being able to use it? And so this is exactly the benefits of exercise. But if the person doesn't exercise, their body becomes less efficient at doing that, okay? Okay, when older adults engage in cardiorespiratory endurance training, VO2 increases 10 to 30% from sedentary measures, okay, pretty significant. Older men exhibit increases in both cardiac output and oxygen extraction, and women exhibit increase in oxygen extraction alone, okay? So, you know, again, it's never too late to start. I showed you that, I mean, it was strength training, but I showed you that video about Gus. So if she could do it, you could do it. Okay, effects of aging on muscular strength and endurance. Strength declines starting at 30, but the majority of decreases occur after 60, all right? Sarcopenia or loss of muscle tissue, the muscles begin to atrophy, all right? And distribution of type 1 and type 2 is maintained. So you saw the same distribution, but there is a loss of, you know, muscle mass through loss of muscle fibers or the motor units, you know, after the age of 60.
Is that decline in strength still there if you strength train, or
It will happen. You still will see a decrease in muscle tissue regardless, but it will be less.
okay.
Okay. Yeah, unfortunately, with age, that's just part of the process, but you can definitely reduce it by, you know, slow it up by both strength training and doing cardiovascular exercise, depending on which systems we're talking about. So strength can improve. Intensity resistance training greater than 80% of 1 RM can cause increase in mass and strength. Strength increases at a rate that is disproportionate to mass gained. So, and that's really what we're looking at, right? You know, I don't think, I mean, maybe there are older people out there that are really looking, you know, for that buff look, but, you know, it's really about maintaining strength, right? So that the person can just get through their activities for daily living, you know, unassisted. I remember once, again, another thing that comes to mind, I always have stories to tell you guys. I just remember being in a Dunkin' Donuts one day and there was a line. Obviously this person I'm about to tell you about had been waiting on this line for a little bit, but by the time he got up to the counter to place his order, he literally leaned his whole body to the counter with his knees bent. If they had moved the counter, he would have fell right on his face. And it just struck me so, because clearly he didn't have the strength or the endurance to stand up on his own. I mean, I didn't even see what he looked like while he was waiting online, but by the time I saw him, he was literally leaning up against the counter that if they moved that, he would have fell. Okay, so strength training in older adults, there is a dose-response relationship between the amount of exercise performed and gain in muscle strength and mass. Muscle mass is important for activities of daily living. I just mentioned that, metabolic rate, and coping with several chronic diseases, specifically type 2 diabetes. Okay, so it's not just based on, you know, diet and cardiovascular disease, but also, you know, strength training. And there's a lot of research out there right now about the ability to, really far with that just happened. Sorry guys, I'm just trying to get back to the slide. There's a lot of research out there with the intensity, with muscular fitness, strength training, and the intensity and the effects that it does have on the cardiorespiratory system. Okay, on body composition, so there's a general increase in body fatness as age, and then that has to do with because of the fat-free mass, right? So we've been talking about how muscle mass declines, so obviously that's going to yield a high percentage of body fat. So fat-free mass is somewhat stable until the age of 40, but decreases in subsequent decades. You know, I don't know how old all of you are, but, you know, I see that every decade there's a change in, you know, where body fat, regardless of what you do, right? It's just your body just changes, right? And as I'm coming into my 60s, I'm starting to see that. You know, I've been hearing it from my older clients, you know, but now I'm experiencing it. So no matter what you do, there's always, you know, there's going to be a change with age. So with age, the accumulation of body fat in muscles, other organs such as the liver increases, while subcutaneous fat tends to decline. So that's interesting, right? Subcutaneous fat is any of the fat underneath the skin. So there seems to be an increase around the muscles, organs, and the liver specifically, but subcutaneously, the fat declines, which is interesting. All right, now we're talking about bone mineral density. The rate of decline is similar to the loss of fat-free mass. So again, muscle or anything that's not fat, let's say. The declines accelerate after menopause. So after a woman stops menstruating and the hormones, have decreased or diminished, estrogen in particular, there's going to be an increase or the potential increase loss in bone. The following components are important for maintaining bone density. So obviously exercise, particularly strength training, weight-bearing activity, and they suggest a activity level of greater than 75%, both aerobically and in strength. Also take calcium. Vitamin D, if you're not familiar with this, vitamin D helps the absorption of the calcium. I have worked with people where they had an issue with calcium absorption, so vitamin D didn't do anything for them, okay? Not that I recommend the last bullet point at all by any means. I have known people that have taken estrogen, that's what the hormones are, and certain drugs, but this one particular woman that comes to mind who I had this conversation with, later on in our, relationship together, she ended up with breast cancer. So when I approached her about, taking a patch of what she considered a very low dosage of estrogen, it's so low, it's not going to happen. P.S. She ended up having to have a double mastectomy. So, and then being treated with chemo. So, I'd be very careful. There's, do some research on there. Maybe you can, again, keep it in your scope of practice. You're not doctors, but the more you educate yourself, if the conversation does come up, you can always direct your clients towards, sound advice. But there was a time where bioidentical hormones were popular, which meant that they mimicked exactly human hormones, and there's no they initially said that it reduced the woman's risk for developing cancer, and I don't think that's the case anymore. So I definitely wouldn't recommend that's something that you're going to have to find a balance, and the better the relationship with your client and yourself, maybe there's some way that you can direct them otherwise. But in my experience, it doesn't end well if a woman is trying to replace the hormones that they lost as a result of menopause. Okay, effects of aging on flexibility. So joint motion is influenced by the condition of the muscle, connective tissue, cartilage associated. So if all of that is declining, obviously there's going to be an issue with flexibility. It is difficult to separate aging effects from the effects of chronic inactivity. That's another thing that plays into a person's ability to be flexible. If they're not moving through full range of motion activities, clearly there's going to be limitations that will develop in the joint. There is limited research on exercise to improve flexibility in old adults. However, I'm sure down the road, because people are living older, they'll start to, collect data on that information. What you'll notice with the older population, with walking and all, they'll start to shuffle. And that happens for a number of reasons, not only, strength and balance, coordination, but, the peripheral vision starts to change. The skin starts to thin, so they might have an increase in nerve sensation when they walk. So there's a lot of things that play into that, but that shuffling actually leads to falling. So if you do see that, it's something that you'd want to try to help your clients to overcome. Okay, so considerations for exercise testing. In this case, you're going to do your screening like we talked about, like you've learned in lab, and then you'll make it, you'll make an educated decision in terms of, what you want to do with this, with the older populations in terms of testing. But, there's definitely going to be limitations. You might have to modify stuff. As I mentioned, with any of the protocols that you use, you have to use the correct protocol for that individual, and you have to have the normative data that support the protocol that you chose. Okay, otherwise the testing is really not valid. Okay, so here's some suggestions for functional testing that you can do. Chair standing, 30 seconds, arms crossed, across the chest. You could do arm curls, 6-minute walk, 2-minute step test as opposed to a 3-minute step test. Chair, sit and reach, back scratches. This is probably all, not probably, it's outlined in your book, but you can certainly look this up too. 8-foot up and go, and height and weight. Okay, so those are just some suggestions if you choose to go the testing route. So the guidelines for physical activity in older adults, some aspects are the same as for adults, but move more and sit less. Recommended levels of physical activity, we've seen this number over and over, 150 minutes a week of physical activity. If they're engaging in 70 to more vigorous activities, it'd be 75 minutes, greater than 2 days a week. And basically the last point is avoiding inactivity. So assuming you're working with, the older, apparently healthy individual, the guidelines are almost the same. And then you would just program based on that person's needs and, customized workout based on that individual, but keeping these guidelines in focus. So again, 150 minutes of moderate activity. If physical activity is not possible, be as active as you possibly can. Include multi-components of physical activity, so that incorporate balance training as well as aerobic and muscular strength. Determine the level of effort for physical activity relative to the level of fitness. We've talked about this already, right? You don't want to over-program. You want to go based on that person's ability. And that's why we talked about it was one of the test questions earlier, right? So we would want to work on duration and frequency as opposed to intensity, and then eventually introduce intensity down the road. Understand how chronic conditions affect the ability to do regular exercise, and I can't state that enough. There are, again, CECs you can take for seniors, to learn about, chronic diseases that they might be more susceptible towards, and then this way, if you're, presented with the opportunity to work, and that happens to be, I think I've shared with you, one of my most favorite populations to work with is seniors, for a number of reasons, but so you can take CECs, continuing education courses that will help you understand that population better. So exercise prescription as relates to aerobic activity, special attention must be given to progression, adapt a conservative approach. The volume of activity should be evenly spread over the course of the week. Intensity, use measured heart rate if possible. If they might be on medication, so you're going to have to find out about that. Use lower end of the target heart rate zone, right? So find out if the doctor wants that to be varied in any way, but if you're going with 68%, stay on the 60% end. And then divide time into 5 to 10 minute segments for individuals who are deconditioned. We talked about this in a previous lecture, where if you want somebody to work out 30 minutes, there's a lot of research to support that they can do 3 10-minute sessions over the course of the day. Depending on the intensity, it's equal or even better than doing a full 30-minute session. Okay, exercise prescription in terms of balance and preventing falls. Listen, we listened to Gus, right? I showed you that video, but you do need to consider, the things under balance because of the decline in strength, because, inherent to the age, the vision, hearing. Okay, these are all medications, any illnesses they have. Okay, all of this is going to play into their balance. Strength being first and foremost, but then you got to consider all of these other aspects, okay, that are just inherent with the age. Increasing difficulty of balance exercises, so, narrowing the base of support, displacing the center of mass, minimizing contributions of visual and proprioceptive pathways. One of my clients who's, now past that 6 months or so now. She used to complain to me all the time. I can't go to my son's house because she's got what she perceived as this few stairs up to the front door, but there were no banisters, right? There were no railings for her to hold on. So she looked at these steps like they went on for forever, like she was going to just fall off the earth, so just simply putting in, maybe her son did put banisters in for a reason, but one can argue that, but that's what they see. Their peripheral vision is so compromised with age that not having access to something to hold on to, that's huge. Okay. And I then speaking, about my mother now, she stopped going out a lot because she didn't want to be assisted. She felt like she looked like an idiot every time, she had a rock to get out of, like, she had to make sure wherever she goes that there's going to be a seat hard and high enough that she could get up out of it by herself. If this place has only, low, soft couches, she didn't want to go, because she just didn't like the way she felt and looked when she was assisted in trying to get up, okay? And who's gonna argue that, right? Okay, so exercise prescription for strength and endurance. Again, progression, provide instructions so that they're safe, that, you focus on technique and breathing. Begin with light intensity and then progress from there, and then perform, more than one set of 10 to 15 reps, 8 to 12 exercises. That's to cover every major muscle group. And try to get them to train non-consecutive days 2 times per week, okay? For power training, use light to moderate loads and aim for 6 to 10 reps with high velocity. Stay within a pain-free range of motion. Participate in low impact. I think I explained low impact is always 1 foot on the ground. And then obviously you want to be cognizant of any issues that they might have, specifically arthritis in this case, should avoid strenuous exercise during flare-ups, right? So you might be working with somebody that, there'll be certain times of the day, certain times of the year where you may find that they have flare-ups of their arthritis, and so you're just going to have to work with them or schedule your appointments with them when they could be less affected by whatever it is that they're having issues with. Flexibility, you want to include flexibility after the warm-up, right? We don't stretch cold muscles. You want to do static stretches, means that you're going to have them, get into a stretch, hold it, don't do any bouncing or ballistic type movement. And then stretches should be performed at least 2 days per week, and hold the stretches for 30 to 60 seconds. All right, guys, we're moving into pregnancy. Any questions on this? So chapter 19 we're up to. Everybody good? All right, I'd like to get through this chapter. A lot of work ahead. Okay, all right, so pregnancy. So again, as I mentioned, we talked about the ACOG guidelines. If you're not comfortable with this population, do not accept a client, okay? You may have clients that you've been working with for years and then they become pregnant, okay? You need to be educated about this population, okay? So you have to understand that, over the 9 months, there's going to be a change in their center of mass, center of gravity is going to change. There's going to be a change in their orthotic curve due to the baby growing, and you're going to see that evidenced by the stomach. There's hormonal changes. This is definitely not the time to work on flexibility. Because due to the hormonal changes, it's preparing the body for birth. So there's going to be, it's going to make the ligaments more lax. It's going to make joints more, unstable. So you don't want to focus on stretching at this point. So these are things that you have to learn. Different positions. So, depending on where they are, you have to make sure that you are, aware of, what phase of the pregnancy they're in. But you have to understand that there's the development of the circulatory reserve for the infant. So there's going to be an increase in blood volume, heart rate, stroke volume, all these physiological changes as a result of the the development of the infant. Pulmonary changes, so increase in oxygen consumption. Now remember, this person, now it's for two, it's not just for one. Okay. There's an increased sensitivity to carbon dioxide, so this is going to increase the tidal volume, okay, the amount of oxygen that's needed to be released by the lungs, okay, to compensate for the carbon dioxide. I do have a slide somewhere why that is. I know I took it. Thermoregulation, that's going to change, okay? So body temperature thresholds for sweating shifts downward. You got to make sure that the person you're working with, the pregnant person, is hydrated, dressed properly, and avoid high heat and humidity. Nutrition demands, okay? Appropriate caloric intake. They need to be finding out from their doctor what it is that they need to do. They have to, there should be weight gain. But you are going to get people there that are afraid of that. So, but there should be, as it states here, approximately 300 to 400 additional calories are needed for later trimesters. All right. So, I've shared with you that I usually get the current ACOG guidelines. You can look it up, ACOG. And I print them out and I order, in this day and age, you can always do a digital and then email them or however you want, or send it to your clients. But you should definitely, know what those guidelines are, share them with your clients and have them run it past their doctor and get back to you with any changes off those guidelines that the doctor would, that the doctor's suggestion that's more, in lines with that particular person that you're working with. But I definitely recommend that you get familiar with that if you plan to work with this population. Okay, so metabolism, insulin resistance increases over time to ensure the fetus has an adequate supply of nutrients. As pregnancy advances, the insulin resistance increases, and if insulin production cannot keep pace, hypoglycemia. You guys might be familiar with gestational diabetes, all right, and that's a type of diabetes that can potentially result because of pregnancy, and even in a woman that's never been diagnosed with diabetes before. Okay, but typically after that, maybe if she were to get pregnant again, she'd have a reoccurrence, but typically it writes itself after the pregnancy. And I'm not really sure, I haven't looked into this enough that, because thank God I haven't had to work with anybody that's had to deal with this, but I'm not sure how quickly it writes itself postpartum. Okay, but you could look into that. Okay, fetal responses. So now we're talking about the baby, the fetus, right? So heart rate of the fetus is minimal to moderate, change by maternal exercise. Increases in fetal heart rate compensate for lower oxygen levels due to reduced placenta blood flow, allowing the maintenance of cardiac output, right? So all the things that we talked about, under normal circumstances, the heart and the brain taking a cutback because the body is needing to send the blood, the oxygenated rich blood to the working muscles, there's going to be some sort of effect to the fetus as a result of that. But regarding birth weight, minimal to no differences have been found between women who exercise during pregnancy and women who do not. There's not a lot of research that they've done on this for obvious reasons. So, like I said, just if you do plan to work with this population, learn, before you take on a client like this. Signs or symptoms indicating that exercise should be stopped. So ongoing shortness of breath, not resolved at rest, if the person starts to experience chest pain, regular painful uterine contractions, vaginal bleeding. I mean, this is pretty significant stuff. So, if you start to see something out of the norm, you want to stop, and then, how you proceed from there, it depends on how serious you think the situation is whether there needs to be medical intervention. Okay, so exercise testing, ACSM recommendations. I don't know that I would even go there with this, but you know, the ACSM does have guidelines, suggest that maximal exercise testing should not be performed at any stage of pregnancy, suggests some maximal exercise testing if warranted. You know what, guys, my feeling, ACSM or otherwise, I don't see the purpose of testing at this point. This would be something that, that you would do, postpartum. But, if you want to go down that route, that's up to you. But, the ACSM is saying that, some X testing could be okay, but you would definitely have to follow and consult the physician. Okay, so we've been through the exercise testing, so I don't think I have to dwell on this, but, again, you decide what you want to do with that. And fetal monitoring, I mean, you're going to need equipment for this stuff, so I don't even know if I would engage in that. So exercise prescription, general recommendations for exercise depend on the activity level prior to pregnancy, as well as current status and presence of any concern or contraindications. So even if you're been working with this person, you gotta, be prudent and, just find out, what do they have a normal pregnancy? What's going on? Maybe it'll start off, normal and then things will change. So you have to be in constant communication with that individual to determine, what needs to be done. If they're previously active, encouraged to continue being physically active throughout the pregnancy. Again, not a lot of studies have been done on this population, but, it does show that it doesn't make the delivery easier. It's hard to say, but it definitely makes them more mentally prepared, maybe stronger, and so on. If they're not previously active, gradually progress program of physical activity recommended. So you'd have to, then therefore contact their physician or get recommendations in terms of, any restrictions or anything like that. So again, 150 minutes a week or more spread throughout the week, 20 to 30 minutes per day on most, if not all days of the week. So consistency is one of the keys here. Intensity, moderate is recommended. You want to use you could use the talk test. So if you're working with somebody and you want to know how they're doing, if they're able to say 3 words in a sentence has always been the guidelines, I'm doing fine, then you could pretty much feel like they're in a good cardiovascular zone. But if they're doing fine, maybe they're working too hard, you can use the rating of perceived exertion, heart rate range, low risk medically screened pregnant women. All right, so what they're saying is that you could use heart rate as long as their risk is low at this point. So again, another reason to speak with the doctor. Types of activity: aerobic conditioning, resistance training, yoga, pelvic floor muscle exercises. I think there's going to be a slide on after a certain point. Yeah, here you go, safety precautions. Avoid physical activity in the supine positions. That means on their back after the first trimester. There's the ACOG suggests considerations after 20 weeks, okay? Because it has to do with, a fetal blood flow and its impact that it has when you're laying on the back. Avoid activities, high, hot, humid environments. Avoid hot Pilates, hot yoga. Avoid scuba diving. Acclimation to high altitude, and avoid activities that include physical contact. Okay, so I think pretty much a lot of this is common sense. Okay, postpartum, a lot of the things that you have to worry about while the person is pregnant continue postpartum if they're breastfeeding, okay? If not, then you might have to consider, was it a natural birth? Did they have to have a C-section, right? So we'll have to consider all that. You may need to deal with postpartum depression, okay? That may be an issue for the individual you're working with, and you may see that. It says here, lactation is not affected by aerobics exercise, feed or express milk before exercise to avoid discomfort. Yeah, look at the ACOG guidelines on that. But, if a woman is producing milk, it can be very uncomfortable. So if they're exercising, that can just enhance the, the level of discomfort. But the ACOG guidelines, as far as I remember them, they always stated that if a woman is breastfeeding, that and whether they breastfeed or not, there's going to be a period of time where they, they are lactating. But if they're actually breastfeeding, you have to worry about, body temperature and heart rate as well. So you would have to look into those guidelines for that if a person is. All right, let me, I'm just going to start briefly the chronic disease, and then I'll let you guys go on break, and that'll put us close. Well, a lot after break, but we'll get through it. All right, so chronic disease. So any condition that lasts 1 year or more and requires ongoing medical attention, okay, or any limitations in activities for daily living or both. So in the United States, 6 of 10 adults have a chronic disease, and 4 out of 10 have 2 or more chronic diseases. Pretty scary. All right, so CVD, cardiovascular disease, it's a disorder of the heart and the blood vessels. CVDs are leading cause of death globally, right? So we talked about physical inactivity being the 4th leading cause, but cardiovascular disease is the number 1. And mainly because they say 85% is a result of heart attacks and strokes. Risk factors include hypertension, high low density lipoprotein cholesterol, so high cholesterol, diabetes, smoking, secondhand smoke, obesity, unhealthy diet, and physical inactivity. Okay, so heart disease and stroke, we're looking at now the pathophysiologically, the pathophysiologies of heart disease and stroke. So atherosclerosis, okay, that's when the arteries become stiff because of the buildup of plaque, and there's a resistance for the blood to flow normally, okay? Atherosclerosis is a type of arteriosclerosis involving the first one, atherosclerosis, is a stiffness of the artery, and that would restrict blood flow. Atherosclerosis is going to be the buildup of the plaque or any fatty deposits within the artery, and that's going to cause a narrowing inside. So one's a stiffness, the other one is a narrowing of the open space where the blood will pass through. Okay, and this is just a picture of that. So what you're looking in the top vessel, this is normal blood flow, but then you see the buildup of plaque on the right, on the bottom image on the right, that yellow stuff, that's the buildup of plaque. And as that continues to build up, it narrows that space, and now the blood will encounter more resistance, okay? Hypertension or high blood pressure, American Heart Association, American College of Cardiologists define anything greater than 130 over 80. They actually have stages now. American Heart Association, American College of Sports Medicine have defined stage 1, stage 2. So stage 1 is when you're in the 120s and in the 80s. And then as it continues to get higher and higher, there are different stages of hypertension. But right here, anything greater than 130 as a top number, systolic, diastolic of greater than 80. And interventions to prevent hypertension would be decreased dietary habits that are causing that, like salt, weight loss for individuals who are overweight, and obviously an increase in physical activity. I'll just go another 2 minutes, guys, and then we'll take a break. I did talk about cardiac rehab programs if necessary. If somebody has had a heart attack, any sort of, they've had bypass surgery, any sort of heart-related issues. There are cardiac rehab programs, and they have them. They also list them in phases. So if the person is in the hospital, that's usually phase 1, where they'll start, some sort of exercise. Phase 2, this is an out-of-patient rehab. They're monitored by usually exercise physiologists and doctors and so on. And then phase 3 and 4, that becomes the maintenance phase. They might be even passed off where they're allowed now to go to their own facilities, and then they just check in periodically for updates, okay? So program beneficial in a wide range of situations, including current stable angina. Angina is chest pain. History of myocardial infarction, that's a heart attack, coronary artery bypass, so if anybody's had bypass surgery. Angioplasty, that's where they go in and they'll, if surgery isn't necessarily needed, but they can, put in a stent, that's what that is, or coronary stenting. The angioplasty is the balloon, okay? The stenting, they actually put a piece of mesh to keep the artery open. Heart failure repair or replacement, heart or lung replacement, and heart failure. Okay, so these would be reasons why people would be in cardiac rehab. All right, it's 8:05. Let's stop here. We'll take a 10-minute break, come back at 8:15, and then we'll dive into the rest of these slides, okay? Everybody good?
Yes, that sounds good. Thank you.
All right, have a good break, guys. Everybody back with me?
I am.
Okay.
Yep.
Great, thanks. You know, so I have to apologize. I know there's a lot in this lecture, but I don't think that, and you guys could tell me differently, you know, compared to the past lectures. I think a lot of this is, are you guys feeling like some of it's common sense and, you know, stuff that, you know, there's a lot of redundancy. Are you guys feeling that, or where are you guys with this?
Yeah, there's,
Yeah, there's a lot of, I mean, I think when, you know, you really stop to, if you go look back on the slides, there's a lot of, you know, redundancy with each of
Yeah.
these diseases, and a lot of common sense, right? You know, that you would probably be able to figure out, you know, and, you know, we've been talking about this since the beginning, scope of practice. You know, we need to understand, you know, what our practices and the parameters or the boundaries for that, and then when we're going to have to, you know, seek professional help other than what we do, you know, to help our clients. And so hopefully, you know, although I'm going through some of this in detail, you know, a lot of it is really out of our scope of practice because we're going to be engaging with the medical professionals to help us, you know, gain a better understanding. Okay, and we've been talking about this since day one. So all right, so we're about to wrap up the recommendation. So again, 3 to 5 days per week of resistance training, 2 or 3 non-consecutive days, right? Flexibility, 2 to 3 days, warm up, cool down. So again, this goes back to what we talked about, you know, in the very beginning in terms of ACSM's guidelines. And so they hold true even in those with chronic diseases. Okay, so cancer. Cancer is the second leading cause of death. I wonder what the third is. So it's heart disease, cancer, physical activity, but I'd like to see if the third one's coming up. Just the first one I'm really focusing on.
accidents.
What is it?
How about accidents?
Maybe, we'll see. Just look it up. Somebody look it up and let me know. Okay, so to lower risk, avoid tobacco, maintain a healthy body weight, avoid or limit alcohol, and be physically active. And as I mentioned earlier about the whole body weight thing, obesity, and I was shocked I mean, I knew that it's like opens up that Pandora's box, but obesity is linked based on research to 10 cancers. So that's pretty significant. Okay, pathophysiology. Cancer is a group of diseases that arise from uncontrolled growth and spread of abnormal cells. Risk factors. So there are genetic factors, and then there are modifiable factors like smoking, tobacco. So, you know, eliminate that. Physical inactivity. So start exercising, things in the diet, so things like that, okay? Okay, exercise considerations. Again, I say this all the time, okay? And you've heard me say this. Exercise can enhance somebody's life no matter what the problem is, even if it's just from a psychological or from mental health, right? So there are benefits of exercise in the prevention of many cancers, as well as after cancer diagnosis, during the treatment phase, and into recent post-treatment or long-term survivorship. So medical evaluation is key for individuals undergoing cancer treatment because modifications may be needed, right? So again, just being prudent, guys. Just, you know, I've had, unfortunately, I'm very well versed in the cancer field because I've had many clients that have been diagnosed, and you know, it's very rewarding, and but at the same time extremely heart-wrenching, you know, because when you get that, when that person tells you that they've just been diagnosed with cancer and you've had this relationship with them, it's definitely going to rock your world. But you know, it's a fact of life. So I would have to say in my career now, I probably worked with at least 6. And then one story I'll share with you quick is recently, a year ago, I guess it was, one of my colleagues at the college was diagnosed with what was called clear cell cancer. It's very rare. It's like 100 people have it, I think, are diagnosed in a year. And he was out of the chronological age that most people get it. But his wife was a client of mine. And I just remembered the day while we were working out, he came down and said, I screwed up 2 lives. I'm like, what are you talking about? He says, well, you know, mine and Kathy's, we wanted to, you know, we were on the verge of retirement and to travel, you know, and he was dead, you know, and I looked at him, you know, you don't know what to say in those points, right? But I remember looking at him, I'm like, John, I said, you don't have the crystal ball. You don't know what's going to come. And, you know, I don't even know, 4 months, 6 months later, he was dead. So, but she's still a client of mine, and I have to deal with, you know, the recourse of that. You know, some days I go there and she's, you know, she's a very upbeat person, but there are days where she's not so, you know, and she's actually about to go on a trip that her cousin is paying for in September. One of these, you know, I think she's going on I forgot what, she's going on a cruise someplace, you know, to another country. I don't remember exactly now. I have to ask her again where she's going, but this was something she was supposed to do with her husband, you know. So, you know, sometimes you're going to have that side of it. You're going to be dealing with the people that's diagnosed with the cancer, but then you're going to be dealing with the people who, you know, you've known both, you know, both, you know, the husband and the wife, and one of them is your client and they lose a spouse. I have a couple of those, actually. I have a crazy story. I don't know if I told you. I have another woman, I'll see you tomorrow. She was diagnosed with cancer during the pandemic. She couldn't have any visitors, as we all knew how the hospitals were running. She had brain cancer, in fact. She had to go for surgery. She had, I can't even tell you, ridiculous complications afterwards. Her husband allowed me to train him, so I was, you know, I was able to go into the house during that time. But no sooner does she go into remission, and he's diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. He's texting me on the way to the hospital as he's going for surgery, and he says, "I'm going to get through this." I said, "You are going to get through this, John." He was dead in 4 months. So it's just, you're going to have to deal with this stuff, and it's only going to make you stronger. And I don't really have any advice other than, you know, you just listen, you know. I just it's heart-wrenching, but you will, you know, unfortunately these are things that you're going to, if you're that trainer, you will deal with stuff like this, and you're just gonna, you know, these people are going to become family, and you're just going to have to deal, you know, and help them, you know, help them through those, you know, those times of need, you know, on whatever level it is. So sorry to drop that bomb, but this is, you know, this has been my career path, and I'm stronger and better for every day that I've had the opportunity to work with people like that. So again, no matter what the person's going through, exercise is going to be beneficial. I've just said more from a psychological standpoint, and it gives them something to be distracted, you know, by. Okay, so it definitely, but, you know, depending on their course of treatment, you know, I've worked with, you know, clients who have had to go through chemotherapy. So the day following, even if they want to do it, sometimes that's not a good day to book an appointment because they're going to be wiped out. Okay, so, you know, you'll learn along the way, you know, what works. These are things, exercise considerations in terms of, you know, things that might occur as a result of the cancer and the treatment. So lipidemia, that's swelling. It might metastasize to the bone. They might have neuropathy, which is inability to feel, okay, because there's some sort of inhibition with the nervous system. The fourth one is actually a procedure where they might have to put in a bag to remove body waste. You might be working with people with that. And then there's always that risk for infection, because anytime a person, more so their course of treatment, it will reduce the immune system. So then that makes them at greater risk for infection. So you may have to, I mean, I wore masks. Anybody that I knew that was, and I would still do that, even though we're not, you know, we don't have to worry about that now, but I would continue to wear a mask if I was working with somebody, you know, so I try to, you know, make sure I wash my hands before I work with them and things like that. So you just have to, you know, even ask the person what they would feel more comfortable that you're doing. you know, when you come to their house. Okay, modifications might be necessary during treatment. Again, you'll have to talk to your client. You might have to consult their physician. So they may continue receiving treatment following the diagnosis, you know, and surgery, whatever that might be. So, you know, they're not going to be the same even if they were a client of yours beforehand. So, you know, obviously, you're going to have to follow a progression. Okay, exercise programs must be individualized with considerations for treatment and related side effects. Okay, I think we've talked about diabetes to some extent, so I think, you know, you guys have a general understanding, but it is a metabolic disease characterized by hypoglycemia. These are the criteria that they use to diagnose prediabetes and diabetes. This is in your textbook table. So chapter 21, table 21.1. Okay, pathophysiology, so 2 common forms we've mentioned, type 1, type 2. Type 1 person is, usually is diagnosed with that, you know, early on. Their body is unable to produce insulin, so now they're insulin dependent. And then type 2 is usually something that increases as a result of age and, you know, whatever, the way they live. Okay, so, you know, obesity, lack of physical activity. Certain ethnic groups are more susceptible, but basically what happens is their body does produce insulin, but there's something going on with the cells in the body, and or as we talked about with just gestational diabetes and the resistance to insulin. So if they eat anything high in sugar, the insulin is not able to regulate that, and that's in both situations. But in one type, with the difference between type 1 and type 2, type 1, the body does not make insulin at all, so they have to, you know, get it in a different way, usually injections, or now they actually have they'll implant you know, devices that will release insulin on a you know, a continuum, so whatever their cycle is. And then type 2, usually it just means that the receptors are as sensitive as they were because of some sort of abuse over time, you know, usually with diet and so on. So so that's the difference.
Is type 2 reversible?
So that's an interesting question. I have a friend, I know several people, but this particular person that I'm speaking about is they were diagnosed pre-diabetes. Okay, so their markers for type 2 were high, but not high enough to classify him as type 2. So he told me, he says, you know what, Laurie, no surprise. He says, you know, the way he wasn't exercising, he was eating, you know, very high sugar diet. So the doctor did put metformin is a drug that they typically use to treat prediabetes. So he was on that, but he was concerned enough, especially with the side effects of the medication, that he, you know, took an active part in his life, started exercising, changed his diet, you know, through the change in diet, he would test his blood glucose just to see, you know, what foods worked, what foods didn't. And then he's the one that took himself off the metformin. And he still continues to monitor his blood sugar, but he lost 50 pounds. So did he reverse it? Absolutely. He didn't, you know, continue down that path, because I look at diabetes as that pathway to, it's really the pathway to heart disease and so many other, you know, neuropathy and so many other more serious issues. So he basically prevented that from happening. Is he still at risk? Totally. Like if he decided to be a recluse again, he'd be back on the path of, you know, so he's still considered pre-diabetic, but he's not medicated for it. He's changed his entire life to be able to reduce his risk. So So I think that once you, once you're diagnosed with it, it's like being, for osteoporosis, right? You could, have the onset of osteoporosis. There's still bone loss, but you're not at the levels where it's considered, osteoporosis. And basically that's diabetes too. Okay. And there are people that are susceptible to that. But I think what happens is there may be some irreversible damage to the insulin receptors, which is why they can't completely reverse the disorder, if that makes sense. Okay, so screening is important. Obviously, if somebody is definitely going, they're going to the doctor regularly, they're going to find out the regular blood screening about their, risk for prediabetes. But this is something definitely that, you want to get clearance for. The need for testing depends on, the individual's risk factors. Remember, we have to, consider the ACSM guidelines and prudently figure out what the course of action is if we take someone on like this as a client. Okay, but from every other aspect, this person I was just telling you about, he lives a healthy lifestyle. I mean, he lost 50 pounds, so that was huge. But not everybody's like that. I know other people that just they're just happy taking metformin, and they don't exercise, they eat like garbage and whatever. But to me, you're standing at death's door. It's just just a progressive, a domino effect from there in terms of how this, what's going to happen in the future for that person in terms of their risk for developing cardiovascular disease. So exercise consideration, so follow general guidelines for healthy adults with some considerations. So adult aerobic exercise 3 to 7 days a week with no more than 2 days between exercise sessions. Resistance training 2 to 3 days, flexibility, balance training. So very similar to what we've been seeing. Again, you got to check with the doctor, make sure. So hypoglycemia, that's a low blood glucose level. So you want to watch for signs and have carbohydrate sources available for that person. Prevention, client can work with physician to adjust diet and insulin. Activities may need to be adjusted within the workout session and minimize the risk of exercise-induced hypoglycemia. Okay, I've actually worked with people like this where, thank God it was at their house. I saw that they were kind of looking a little lethargic. I asked them how they're feeling, if they're feeling, describe how they're feeling. And usually it might be because before I got there, they ate something like a bowl of cereal, let's say, without a protein. And it caused a spike or a drop in their not that, because you're not digesting those carbs at that point, so there may be an imbalance at a point where they're feeling because I've experienced myself, I don't know if anybody's had this, but it's a very strange feeling, like your body feels shaky and all. And so if I'm at someone's home, I'll actually ask them, do you have any cheese you can eat quickly, nuts you can eat, and it will actually regulate that and make them feel. It happens fairly quickly too, within a few minutes if you can catch it early on. Yeah, and that's something that you want to look at. But you'll start to see that the person might get a little pale looking, maybe start to sweat, and feel a little lethargic if you ask them what's going on, a little shaky. Okay, hypoglycemia can occur with exercise due to consuming too much carbs during exercise. So that that's a difference. So low glycemia, glucose, where hypoglycemia is high, and so this is associated though with diabetes. Okay, so even if somebody says, oh yeah, I have hyperglycemia, this pattern can continue resulting in someone long-term being diagnosed with diabetes, okay? But in both cases, hypo, hyper, what they're stating in these slides is that there is an association with either of those with the body's ability to process glucose and the insulin uptake, okay? So both of these have been associated with a risk of being diagnosed later in life with diabetes. Okay, so these, the 4 things you see below, these are other things that can result. As I say, it just opens up this Pandora's box in terms of developing, you know, other issues. So peripheral neuropathy, that's, you know, what I was talking about before. That's an issue with the nervous system at the peripheral level. Diabetic renal pathology, so any, you know, issues with the eyes. Autonomic neuropathy, so that's an issue where there's a damage in the nerves and the communication. It affects the messages that are being sent between the brain and the organ system, okay? And the last one is another fancy name for kidney or renal disease, okay? Nephropathy. Okay, pulmonary disease. So obstructive pulmonary disease, that's airflow in and out of the lungs is affected, okay? And that's, you know, there's some sort of impedance between the airflow in and out. Restrictive lung disease, expansion of the lungs reduced to problems in the chest cavity or lung tissue. This is typically associated with emphysema as a result of smoking cigarettes. The nicotine messes up the elasticity properties of the lungs and its ability to expand and contract properly. So as a result of not getting that contraction and then expansion, you're not going to get the same tidal volume or amount of air moving in and out of the lungs, okay?
No.
Okay. Do you have a question? Okay. So types of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, asthma, bronchitis, emphysema, which I mentioned, obstructive pulmonary disorder, cystic fibrosis. This is a genetic condition. So asthma, you probably also have heard of exercise-induced asthma, but it varies from wheezing and slight breathlessness to severe attacks resulting in suffocation. It could be caused from a allergic reaction, emotional stress, exercise, infection, and then other unidentifiable causes. Exercise-induced bronchial constriction is a reactive airway disease that can occur in individuals with asthma as well as in the general public. Exercise tends to cause bronchioles to constrict, especially when there is evaporative water loss, temperature change, and exposure to irritants, okay? So, you know, if you are working with people that have this, you certainly want to have their inhalers on hand, okay? Chronic bronchitis is emphysema. So bronchitis, that's inflammation of the bronchiole, and it produces a cough. Emphysema, destruction. This is what I'm talking about, the alveolar walls and enlarging of the air spaces, which reduces the lung surface area of gas exchange. So they're not getting the same amount or volume of air. Cigarette smoking, like I said, nicotine has a high affinity. So if you do smoke and the body has a choice between, the hemoglobin in particular has a choice between nicotine and oxygen, and it'll choose nicotine, okay? And then nicotine also has a breakdown. It will break down the tissue, especially the lung tissue. Other risk factors: secondhand smoke, air pollution, chemical fumes, workplace or environmental dust, or genetics, okay? So which they're stating here is rare. So just like cardiac rehab, they have pulmonary rehabilitation if that's necessary. And typically people with emphysema, will, definitely participate in these programs. So it doesn't directly improve the lung function, but offers symptom relief, enhances exercise tolerance, and provides health-related quality of life benefits. All right, osteoporosis, that's a disease that affects the bone by decreasing, the density of the bone. Sometimes it has to do with, as I mentioned earlier, the person's inability to absorb calcium. Alaska, where they have, periods of, lack of sunlight, or people that just are not exposed to sunlight, they're at risk for that. So there are, particularly from the bone density test that we talked about when we did all of the different types of ways to assess body fat. That machine, if you go, women typically at the age of, I think baseline is like 40 or 45, and then at 50, you would do this every couple of years, but they do measure the hip, the lumbar spine, I think it's the wrist as well, and then they, based on the data that's collected, they're able to determine based on normative data where you fall in on the spectrum in terms of, your risk for osteoporosis. So you might be diagnosed with osteopenia. So just like prediabetes, it's the onset of osteoporosis. Doesn't mean that you will become osteoporotic, but that's the point where you really want to, if you haven't done already, you really want to, figure out ways that you can, slow that process down, and particularly weight training, okay? Because calcium with vitamin D, as I mentioned earlier, isn't always the cure-all because people are not able to absorb it, okay? But sunlight definitely enhances that, and weight training enhances that. So women are more prevalent than men. The risk factors including having a thin, slender frame, having this would be genetics. If there is a risk factor where you have a parent that is osteoporotic, specifically because of estrogen or testosterone, men are prone for it too, but women more so. If you eat, your diet contains low levels of calcium, vitamin D, consuming alcohol heavily for long periods of time can cause it. Physical inactivity, certain medications can certainly cause it. So bone mass peaks in early adulthood and then declines during middle adult years. Women experience a rapid loss of bone mass around the years of menopause, and men tend to have fractures later in life than women. Women have a higher lifetime fracture risk due to smaller bone size and increased fall of risk. Okay. Okay, so exercise considerations. Preschool age children should include activities like hopping, skipping, jumping, and tumbling. School age 6 to 17 should include muscle and bone strengthening activities in addition to aerobic exercises, and optimize bone mass with bone loading activities in early adulthood. There was a study that was done with women that commuted by train. And it actually showed that vibration, repeated exposure to the vibration when the train was coming in on the tracks, that those women were at less risk for developing osteoporosis. So I thought that was pretty interesting. In middle age and older adulthood, exercise has a potential role to slow the rate of bone loss, but it's definitely going to happen as a result of aging. Include weight-bearing physical activity, activities that involve jumping, and resistance training that target all major muscle groups. So testing consideration for individuals with osteoporosis, modify the test protocol for those with severe kyphosis, that's the rounding. We have the kyphotic curve in the thoracic area of the spine, but if it's exaggerated, now becomes an osis, which is called kyphosis, that limits forward vision or balance. So you might need to be testing on a cycle as opposed to a treadmill. Maximal exertion and significant spinal flexion be avoided in muscular fitness testing. So, again, speak with the person's doctor and find out what's going to work best for that individual. Exercise training, we keep mentioning this, weight bearing, aerobic exercise 4 to 5 days a week, resistance training 8 to 10 exercises. That's going to cover every major muscle group on 1 or 2 days per week. May progress to 2 to 3 days per week. Remember, resistance training is key for this population for sure. Balance exercises are valuable for fall prevention. I'm going to tell you, if you can get that person strong, that's going to help them, increase their balance. Avoid activities with explosive movements, high impact loading, and excessive twisting. And this is because, the bones are more sensitive, so you don't want to do, explosive movements, high impact movements for risk of fracture. All right, guys, any questions on that? All right, we're heading into behavior modification. If you recall, on Friday, there were some questions about theories. That's where we're headed now. And then the last section is going to be on legal, issues that we need to consider. So just for the sake of time, because we have about 45 minutes left, there is you all received the PowerPoint. There are a set of questions for this for lecture 5. I think what I'm going to do at the end, I'm just going to give you guys the answers, put that aside, and then just go ahead and test yourselves, just for the interest of time, okay, if you guys are all right with that. Okay, so these are the different theories of behavioral change. You have the theoretical model of behavioral change, self-determination theory, and the social cognitive theory. Basically, when I think I shared with you when I was writing my dissertation, I needed to choose 2 theories. So this is why we're bringing this in, is as a personal trainer, you should really have some ideas of theories that might fit into your scope of practice. And this is just going to give you better understanding of the people that you're working with. Okay, so that's the purpose of this. Okay, so when we talk about the trans-theoretical model of behavioral change, it emphasizes individual motivation, readiness to change, and personal history regarding target behavior. Change begins when people are prepared to take action. There are 2 components. This is stage of change, and then attitudes, belief, and skills for change. There's also action and did I skip something? Sorry. Attitude, yeah, I did skip, hold up. So the different stages, you have the pre-contemplation stage, the contemplation stage, preparation, and I'll leave you guys to read this on your own. Okay, and then you have the action and the maintenance. So these are all the stages of change as it relates to the trans-theoretical model. Okay, so attitudes, beliefs, and behavioral skills. So self-efficacy is confidence to accomplish the task, confidence to overcome personal and environmental barriers, decisional balance, so evaluating pros and cons of the decision, and process of change. So it's cognitive and behavioral. Okay, so applying theories to promote health. Match intervention to the individual's physical activity history and their readiness to change, right? You might get somebody that, it's all gun ho. I think I shared the story with you where I had, when I was working in this corporate fitness center, we had this couple, they came in, they bought the membership at $500 each. They went out and got themselves all new clothing, head to toe, right down to brand new sneakers. They came in, they did the evaluation. I just remember when I was learning about a lot of this in my, it was my undergraduate at that point in exercise science, and they said, yeah, most people will commit for about 2 weeks, and if they're not, 100% vested, they're gone in 2 weeks. And that's exactly what happened to this couple. I'll never forget it, because it just kind of proved what I had learned in school. But you will have those people. So that, adopting a theory might help you understand, this process and be able to, be more prepared to work with that individual. So this table takes you through the strategies for the stages of change as it relates to the theory. Okay, the trans. Okay, this slide, encouraging the inactive and unmotivated. So present information that is convincing, personal, and timely. Expose to physically active role models, right? So if we can, introduce them or put them in groups where people can serve as role models for them. Enhancement of perceived benefits. So, obviously, if you can explain, the benefits of engaging in the activity. Strengthening of psychosocial variables such as self-efficacy for exercise, increasing knowledge of health benefits and exercise and awareness of how one's inactivity affects others. Okay, so you might want to address the fact that here's the benefits of exercise, but at the same time how their inactivity or their inability to maintain some sort of healthy lifestyle, how is that going to affect their spouses, their children, and so on and so forth. Okay, a lot of times you'll get people that'll come in for that very reason. They'll start exercising because of a peer or a spouse or something, and it just scares them enough that they now want to start making life changes. Influencing motivation and action for exercise adoption. Assessment of personal, social, and environmental factors that support current activity levels, determination of physical fitness, motivation, goals, supports, and barriers, engagement in goal setting, behavioral contracts, and time management training. I think you guys talked about behavioral contracts in maybe lab 2. So, maybe that's something that, you may feel that that's helpful. Sometimes if people sign a contract, they'll commit to it. And certainly if you put a time limit on it, it's not an open-ended thing, you say, okay, commit for 12 weeks or whatever that might be, you might find that the person is, will comply. And then as they start to see that, the things that you're telling them are true, that they're definitely seeing an improvement in, their overall health, from whatever levels that is, psychological, physical, and so on, that might be just enough to, to make this part of their life. Okay, so personal influences for exercise. So demographics plays into it, activity history, past experiences, right? Their perception of their health, access to facilities, time, enjoyment of the exercise is definitely, benefits, self-motivation, self-efficacy. So all of these things will play into, but the interesting thing about perception of access to facilities and, so I had always heard that if it depends on, the demographics, but most people will drive. I'm not sure if these statistics still hold, but if you live in a city, like New York City, let's say, people will venture out up to 8 minutes to walk to a, to get to a facility. Out, in the suburbs, they'll drive 8 minutes, but if it's any longer than that, they're not going to be consistent with it. So, I always wanted to, when I learned that years ago, I always wanted to look into see if that still is hold true. But, it's definitely going to be a reason why people will, continue to work out or not, that if they're going to commit. Okay, intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, self-motivation. I just did with my students, I had them do a reflection paper. They just started a 5-week course, and I just wanted to see where they are now, and then I'm going to have them reflect at the end to see if there's been any changes, so they can make comparisons from, you know, the first week versus the 5th week. And many of them actually said that they were motivated as a result of the support system they had. So the friends that they met at the gym, or you know, the only student that kind of comes to mind right now is that there was a student that said that most of her family members are extremely motivated to exercise, but she wasn't really. Now, I don't know if that made her less interested because the rest of the family was just too over the top. But most of them did say that, you know, because of their support system, whether it was a boyfriend, a girlfriend, you know, a spouse of some level or whatever, a partner of some level, friends and so on, cousins, you know, whatever, that's the reason why they continue to work out. Perceived behavioral control, so choices for exercises, when, where, and how, and setting own goals. So that's key, right? We can't dictate everything, okay? We might, you know, be able to give them, there's got to be a balance between what we know that they need and what they also feel they need. So if it's going to be all about you, you're going to lose the client. So you have to give them, you know, some rope and, you know, have them part of you know, engage them in the planning process of, you know, so that they'll stay committed to it. So social influences, comfort, assistance, and information provided by individuals or groups, practical help, emotional support, group exercise, support from family, friends, physician. This is what I was just talking about. Environmental influences, so again, social support, accessibility, attractiveness, safe facility, right? That's key. And convenience, you know, if it's not convenient, the person's not going to work out for sure. They're going to find their excuse in the book. Okay, motivational strategies, increasing adherence. So review exercise history to develop positive attitude, make it personal, develop skills to support behavioral change, increase self-efficacy and sense of competency, set reasonable and realistic goals, so key. Identify and overcome barriers, set up incentives. Maybe you need to create some sort of incentives, whatever that might be. You know, but it's also helpful to discuss, you know, challenges or barriers that they might have been confronted with when they haven't been successful in the past. Especially if they told you, yeah, so I used to exercise and I stopped and I started again, or why all this start and stop? What's going on in their life that you might want to address with them. So increasing self-efficacy, so mastery experiences, verbal persuasion, modeling, and understanding normal physiological responses to exercise. Okay, you know, let them know, be upfront with them. What can they expect? Like what are going to be the changes so they're not frightened by them, right? And if you can put them in a group where others can, you know, they can model the behavior of others that, you know, no different than kids, right? You don't want to be, you know, if you're not that buff jack person, you just don't want to be in the gym. You know, most people who join gyms, they stay away from, you know, that area, that free weight area. They're, you know, they're with, you know, people in an area where they feel most comfortable. If they go into an area where they feel like, you know, people, and we know that they don't know what they're doing, but they feel like they go into that area and they have no business being there because these people know more than them, you know, it's going to be very intimidating for them. Okay, so you're not going to even know, maybe you're pushing the free weights and so on, but maybe, you know, then you'll have to decide times of the day that work best, that where that area isn't, you know, overflowed with, you know, people that are going to make that person feel intimidated. Okay, assessments, select and carry out appropriate strategies, periodically reassess. Okay, we've talked about this many times. Identify the problems in behavioral terms, examine past attempts at behavioral change, determine if initiation is voluntary or recommended, consider using a balance sheet. So the second to last bullet point, you know, are they there because their spouse said, well, you better get to the gym, or the doctor said, you got to do this, right? So, we hope it's voluntary on some level, but you are going to get people that are there because, a peer had a heart attack, or the doctor said that they're now at risk for X, whatever that is. Hopefully you can, also convince them that, they have a choice, and let's find things that's going to, accomplish the goal of getting them healthy, but at the same time, they can enjoy what they're doing and make decisions on, what they're going to do. Okay, sustaining motivation and behavioral adherence. So self-monitoring is key, time management is key, setting goals is key. So you're going to want to work with the person to, to work on all of these. Reinforcement, so social reinforcement. You don't want to go over the top with, wow, that was great, or, rewards that are, that could probably, be at a point, could be a little annoying. So, but behavioral conscience, again, make the person commit. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. You'll have to see the people you're working with. Relapse prevention, so defining high-risk situations, developing coping strategies for exercise. It doesn't hurt that if a person kind of drops off, just call them. Even if you work for a gym, hey, you haven't seen you in a while, what's going on? Maybe that little bit, letting the person know that you care, will allow them to come back to the gym, because they may just think, oh, no, he or she works at the gym, she's got so many clients, so many members, they probably don't even know that I'm haven't been coming. So that one little phone call might make all the difference. Health, fitness, counseling. So communication skills, listening is key. Attend to verbal and nonverbal, as well as overt and covert messages. Be aware of noise that interferes with sending and receiving messages. The point of this slide is really just, listen to your clients, communicate with your clients. Maybe there's just things going on that you're not picking up. Again, you're not the therapist, but we do become that. And there's going to become a level of trust, intimacy, and so on. And people are going to share things with you. And, maybe you'll just start to see that they're kind of off a little bit. They're not, I just mentioned this recently to somebody I'm working with, and I just said to her, I said, you're not acting like yourself, lately. And then, and I said, I'm not trying to be nosy. I just want to let you know that I'm aware of some sort of change. And then she was forthcoming in telling me what was going on. And it wasn't like she was looking for my advice or anything like that, but it just kind of opened up and gave her that opportunity to feel that she could talk to me in a safe place and know that I wasn't going to share that information with anybody else. So, sometimes it just takes your ability to recognize that something's not right, especially if you've been working with a person for a while. Okay, so counseling, being an effective helper requires one to be empathetic, respectful, concrete, genuine, and willing to confront issues directly. And, I think that's pretty straightforward. If you do work with people that know one another, just a piece of advice, do not tell tales, okay? If you have clients that know one another and they share something with you, do not pass that information on to other people. I've known, I actually ended up getting clients because of that, because there was a trainer that worked with this group that did that very thing, and my rule of thumb is not my story to tell. You want to share that with me, the buck stops there. I am not going to tell anybody else, okay? But if you do become that trainer that does that, you are going to get a reputation for sure. Qualities of an effective health behavior counselor. So being knowledgeable, supportive, model of health behavior, trustworthy, enthusiastic, self-aware, innovative, patient, culturally sensitive, respectful, and flexible. I had a client that always told me, she goes, I would never train with a trainer that doesn't look the way I want to be, right? So, you know, and I, you know, on a level I agree with her, but on a level I don't, right? Years ago, I owned an aerobic studio, and you know, I had what you would expect trainer, you know, aerobic instructors to look like. But then I had one, you know, when I interviewed this one young woman, she was overweight, but she knew her stuff, you know. And I remember getting feedback from some of my members. I'm like, excuse me? I'm like, why don't you take her class first and see what she can do? I mean, she's very knowledgeable. She can certainly give you a great workout, but it just like, it shocked me that, you know, judging a book by its cover. And, you know, she, you know, people did, you know, grow to like her, but, you know, first impressions, I'm like, get over that, get over yourself. But you know, basically what this slide is saying is that if you can incorporate all of that in your practice, you're definitely going to be more successful. So you want to be able to access material and services, able to generate expectations of success, committed to providing timely and specific feedback, capable of providing clear and reasonable instructions and plans, sensitive to physical barriers to communication, while respectful of personal space, and aware of personal limitations. All right, I think that moves us into the final chapter, which is 23, and we have about 25 minutes left. There's actually 2 on legal. All right, so we'll get through this. Again, I apologize for the pace, but I want to be able to cover as much as I can. A lot of this is going to be, again, kind of, you should be able to figure out. But again, you know, scope of practice, guys, when we start talking about legal, injury prevention, legal considerations, you know, we're going to hopefully, you know, rely on attorneys. If you work for a facility, they should have attorneys on hand that they can address this with. But, you know, having some knowledge about this will allow you to, you know, make decisions within our scope of practice, okay? So an EPA, that's Emergency Action Plan. I can't tell you how important this is, and I think I shared the story about the club I work for, this corporate fitness center in this huge office building, and you know, one of my members left there one night, and they found him dead in the parking lot, but I didn't find out for 30 minutes, and that's when I found out that there was not a even if we, and which we did, we had an emergency plan in-house for the club, but we were all connected between all of the different, you know, offices, the businesses that were in this building, and we didn't have an EAP for the entire building. So I ended up writing one, but, you know, it was after the fact. Could we have saved this guy's life? You know, I don't have that crystal ball, but you definitely need to, if you do work for a facility, don't be afraid to ask if there's one in place, all right? And they should hold staff meetings and trainings so that everybody knows what that plan is. You know, if it's on paper, then it's only as good as the paper it's on. You know, there should be trained EAP professionals for every shift, okay? So that, you know, everyone knows their role during that time, okay? So you're not looking at each other when something happens. There must be a communication plan, and then obviously access to emergency equipment that works. So that, you know, that's another part of the link, is that this stuff needs to be assessed on a continuum, okay? AEDs, anything that you have, things expire. You need to make sure that these things work so that in the event of emergency, you have access to them, and you know, they will be able to do the job that they're supposed to do. So I had an issue right here in my the Condo complex. I wasn't here yet, but last summer there was a woman playing tennis. Luckily, she was on the court with a a nurse practitioner, excuse me. So she was able to start CPR. Somebody ran to get the AED. It was expired and not working. Okay, if it weren't for the nurse practitioner, that woman, I mean, she was dead. She had a massive heart attack on the court. they would have never resuscitated her. So, you know, it's a very crazy, you know, stressful moment when something like that happens. I hope it never happens to any of you, but there's a good chance it may, especially if you work in a facility. So you have to make sure that everybody's trained in CPR and that there is an AED on hand that's working. Okay, so chronic versus acute injury. Chronic injuries occur over time with repetitive force producing microtrauma, and an acute injury force acts on a tissue and produces a macrotrauma. So it's going to be more instantaneous. Sorry about that. Forces involved in the injury process include compressive, tensile, and shear forces. All right, so signs and symptoms of injury, you know, sometimes a person might be complaining of point tenderness, okay? Pain that persists even when the body part is at rest. Joint pain, pain that doesn't go away after a warm-up, swelling or dislocation, discoloration, increased pain with weight-bearing activity, changes in normal body function. So again, you want to be aware of these signs and symptoms, and then your next course of action, you know, depending would be, you know, to suggest that they see a doctor, you know, unless it's something severe that needs immediate attention, and you know you need to call emergency, an ambulance or something. Classification. So these are different classifications of soft tissue injury that you could look through: mild, moderate, and severe. Okay, price. This was something that just trying to see if it's, yeah. So you probably have heard of RICE, rest, ice compression, elevation. So price, protect, completely immobilize, stabilize the injury and the areas above and below. Rest ranges from modifying activity to stopping activity. Ice, apply 20 to 30 minutes, reapply several times in the first 24 to 72 hours. Compression, applied pressure firmly but not to impair circulation, and then elevation. Okay, you know, obviously in this case the person may need to be passed on for medical attention. Okay, use of heat. If you're using heat, this does increase circulation, muscle excitability, tissue elasticity, cellular metabolism, nerve conduction. Heat should not be applied on an acute injury. Okay, it's usually ice. And I did some research back when I was going for, it was my undergrad, that there is known healing properties of ice as opposed to heat, although heat's much more comfortable. I'm sure we've all heard of DOMS, delayed onset of muscle soreness. You know, some people are sore, get sore immediately, some, you know, hours later, some 24 hours later, some 48 hours later. So basically, muscle soreness is typically a result of micro tears in the muscle. So to minimize or avoid DOMS, give muscle the opportunity to adequately recover and adapt. I mean, you might feel soreness, but you also want to make sure that that muscle has time for growth and repair before you work that muscle again, right? So even though they're saying to not train on consecutive days, so every other day, I always tell my clients, if the muscle's still sore, don't pound on it. It still needs time to for growth and repair, okay? Okay, so treating fractures, obviously this is out of our scope of practice, but this is something that you're gonna want to, you know, to consider. You know, some people may not realize that they did fracture something. I remember I guess December, it'll be 2 years, I had fractured bone, you know, on the pinky side of my hand. And it, you know, I didn't really think it was broken. I remember feeling a pop, but I'd never broken a bone. I shouldn't say that. I fractured my rib. That hurt like a, like you know what. But the hand, not so much. So I didn't really think that I, you know, fractured it. I remember speaking to a professional, and they said, well, you really should go get it x-rayed, because if the bones are displaced, that can cause even further problems in the future. So that made me nervous. I went and got x-rays, and it turns out the bone, there was a hairline fracture, but the bone still stayed intact. And I had to continue to go for x-rays to make sure for over 4 weeks to make sure that the bone was healing. So after 4 weeks, I think then that ended. But, there are issues that if a bone, like there are some bones, they don't do it. Like I wasn't, I think they gave me, some sort of like pinky splint only because to make me feel better if I accidentally hit it. But they weren't going to put me in a cast or anything like that. Surgery would have been required if I had displaced it. But the same thing when you break a toe or something like that. There are bones that they don't, rib cages, they don't treat them. They don't, they used to wrap them, but they found that caused, even more severe issues. So, but, being aware of if somebody says, yeah, I'm feeling some point tenderness, some pain, I see some swelling, maybe deformity, at least you can then say, okay, yeah, I remember learning about that. I really think that maybe you should go get that checked out because it could be, but again, you can't diagnose as a personal trainer. Treating fractures, so, if you're at the, there's a moment where, you're with the person when it happens. So control bleeding, prevent infection for open fracture, right? If the bone snaps, compound fracture, and it pierces the skin, you might have to do, some control of the bleeding at that point till the EMS arrive. Obviously immobilize the area that is fractured, call for emergency EMS, and then do not attempt to reduce a fracture at all. So that means putting it back into place, okay? If you take CPR, especially not the American Heart Association, geez, I can't think of it right now. But they would give you, and American Heart may also, but why can't I remember the other one? American Heart Association, and anybody know for lifeguarding? They do the first aid. I can't think of it right now. But they do, you can actually take CPR and first aid together. So that might be something that you might want to do just to learn,
The AHA does offer it as well.
Oh, they do a first aid as well?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, yeah, I'm trying to think. Red Cross, the American Red Cross. There we go. So, you may want to take the first aid component as well. Gives you some knowledge, and you could bridge the gap before EMS arrives. Okay. Okay, so we already talked treating. Okay, clean the fracture site. You might want to. Some of it you may not want to get into unless you have the right training. All right, so this goes through types of wounds, abrasions, incisions, lacerations, punctures, blisters. You can read through that. Medical emergency, excessive bleeding, external bleeding that results in, so this is just giving you definitions, but you basically, the whole idea is you want to treat for shock and alert EMS immediately. Okay, air quality. I'm sure you heard about this in Chicago. You can turn on the news in the morning and it's going to give you a report. You could ask your devices about the air quality, but if you are intending to do work with clients outside and there is, the air quality is compromised in some level, you might want to rethink that. So you may want to, there's an index, AQI, and you can also look at the EPA, environmental protection, in order to give you information. But the news does that on a regular basis. I know here in New York they do. Wait, did I skip air quality? Got that. Okay, heat illness. So water loss of up to 2% of body weight is considered safe. 3 to 5% is cause for concern, and anything greater than 5% is serious. So they go through, some of the things that can happen as a result of, these 4 things down at the bottom are in the category of heat illness. So you can read through those. All right, so preventing heat injury. If the person's going to be, working out in the heat, they should acclimate gradually over a period of 10 or 14 days. They're suggesting, obviously, hydrate adequately, modify activity, take breaks, monitor weight loss because that'll be correlated with the sweat loss, wear appropriate clothing, get adequate sleep, and do not exercise if you're vomiting or having diarrhea. So yeah, obviously, because then, we go into, heat exhaustion, heat stroke, okay? And that becomes a very serious medical injury. Okay, now we get into frostbites. Here's the different types of frostbite that you can read through. Again, I think this is common sense. So preventing it, avoid exposure to extreme cold and wind. Consider layering clothes, especially for the extremities. Warm up before activity and avoid bouts of inactivity. Stay dry. Avoid swimming and exercise in cold water, and maintain proper hydration and nutrition. So this goes into diabetic coma. So you could read through some of the signs and symptoms, but obviously there's an immediate need to activate EMS. Okay, so call 911. And by the way, if you guys, wherever you're practicing, whether you're in a facility or you're working in people's homes, it's not a bad idea to have like the list of local fire departments or EMS, because if you're going through the 911 system, they're going to dispatch the call anyway. So if a person, is, right near a fire department, it's always easier to just call them directly, and then the response will be quicker. So, if you happen to work at a facility per se, it might be a little bit harder if you're a personal trainer, you have clients all over. But if you work, at a facility, maybe it would be helpful if you just kind of, know the area and where the closest fire department is. This talks about insulin shock. Okay, so you can read through signs and symptoms of that. Emergency procedures. So, I know you have to take CPR, so they're going to be addressing a lot of this kind of stuff in CPR. And 5 basic vital signs. So heart rate, breathing, blood pressure, body temperature, and color. All right, the final chapter is 14, just some legal considerations. So this basically takes you through the types of injuries, how injuries occurred, and the case. So if you want to look at that, this is chapter 24, table 24.2. Okay, so if you're interested in that, you can take a look. Causes of injury and negligence. So negligence, failure to do something that a reasonable, prudent professional would do. Doing something that a reasonable, prudent professional would not have done given the same circumstance. Most injuries in fitness facilities arise from inherent risks, negligence, or product defects. We talked about this in the questions that we did on Friday. Okay, so 4 elements to prove negligence: duty, breach of duty, causation, harm, and damages. And again, this is well, if you're not going to sue, you're going to be sued, right? And then there's an attorney out there that's going to find out whether you're negligent or not. And this is where I circle back, and I've said this before: just because you work for a facility doesn't mean, even if they insure you, that you're 100% insured. So I do recommend, once you get your certification, that will open up opportunities to get lower rates. It typically is no more than $200 at best. And God forbid, if you are sued while you're working independently or, in a facility and an attorney goes after everybody that's involved, you'll be protected. Okay. Best defense is to carry out legal duties properly. Primary assumption of risk defense: plaintiffs are not allowed to seek damages. informed consent. So, basically all of the forms that you learned early on, they're going to help you to be prudent in terms of, reducing your risk, because you'll be able to show that you have documentation that you did assess that individual for risk, and went through the steps to reduce the risk of that person becoming injured. But I also talked about signing away your liability. Again, you have to check the laws in Chicago, but I know in New York, if someone is negligent, whether you sign or not, you can be sued. Okay. Waiver defense. This is basically what I was just talking about. So you'd have to check the laws in your states. These are just general laws at this point. 3 federal laws applicable to fitness professionals. So you have the ADA, that's the American with Disabilities Act. Okay, you have OSHA, which is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration Bloodborne Pathogen Standard. I actually used to have, when I was running the Corporate Fitness Center, I had a woman that would come in every year and take us through the course and certify us for OSHA regulations. And then I had some of the products on hand for if somebody's was bleeding, and you just clean it up with normal, like whatever, Clorox or whatever. It has to stay on the blood for a certain period of time to eliminate the contamination. But OSHA approved products can be sprinkled on and immediately removed, and remove the contamination as well. So you'd have to look into that if you work in a facility. Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, that's HIPAA. We've talked about this already. Any records that you accumulate from any of your clients or members at a facility, you have a legal obligation to protect the right of that individual and any of the information that they provided, or you could be sued. Okay, determining duty, consideration, court determines duty. Okay, so you can read through this stuff. Again, this is a little bit out of the, our scope of practice, but you can read through. Okay, published standards of practice, ACSM definition, standards, minimum requirement that fitness facilities must meet to provide a relatively safe environment, guidelines, recommendations to improve the quality of the experience provided by the users. National Strength and Conditioning, their definition of standards require procedures for the standards of care, and guidelines recommend operating procedures to enhance quality of service provided. So when I was running that Corporate Fitness Center, the Board of Health for Queens, I was in one of the 5 boroughs, they required that I had a written plan. So they provided the empty plan for me, and I had to fill in all the blanks, and it took hours and hours. And this way, if a Board of Health representative came in, they wanted to see that. If I was called out on something, I'd have to go for a hearing and present this, the protocols that were set forth, and if it wasn't adequate, we would get fined for it. So, again, you have to check your local state and city regulations, or just state and local regulations to find out what's required. Okay, so 4 steps for risk management: assess liability exposure, develop risk management strategies, implement a risk management plan, evaluate the risk management plan, formative and summative. Again, if you work for a facility, they should have, attorneys on hand. If there are things that might expose you from a liability perspective, maybe that you need to bring it to their attention. This could be cords, to the treadmill. They're just out in place, they're not conveniently located to the outlets because they didn't put the outlets right at the machine. And so there's a chance that someone can walk by and trip on the cord. Maybe there's a ceiling tile that's about to come down. It could be, anything. There are mirrors and one of them is cracked, and if somebody runs their hand, they're going to get cut. I had to learn about signage, exit signs and, all these different signs that were required for fitness facilities. If you're going to go that route and go into management, it's something that you're probably going to have to be responsible for.
If you see someone using incorrect form, is it your job, if they're not your client, to correct them if they're in your gym?
So that's an interesting, question because, yes, as a professional, what I'd say is it your responsibility. That would be showing, a sign of acting responsibly and going over to that person and introducing yourself and say, hey, do you mind? I was, watching, this, and I'd like to give you some advice. I don't know if I shared the story that happened to me early on when I started this position as the GM. I was watching this guy and his form was terrible. I went up to him, I introduced him. I said, yeah, I just started here. I'm the GM of the facility. I've noticed that you're doing some things incorrectly. I'd like to help you out. He actually looked me in the face and said, women belong barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen. So, I got thick skins, and he turned out to be a really great guy as I got to know him. But be prepared. There are people that don't want to be bothered. So is it your responsibility? No. But if, especially if you do it in front of other people and something were to happen, other people can be, witnesses to say, this facility is constantly offering, help and support to the clients. Okay. So it's not your responsibility unless, you're actually working with that person. And that's when I think you could be, listen, an attorney could say, well, who was on while that person got hurt, even though they didn't have a personal training appointment with that individual? Give me a list of all the names of the people that were on and that were on the floor that could have possibly saw this guy doing this and didn't go up and correct him. You could always they can always find a reason. Is it your direct responsibility? I would think not, but, again, it all depends on how the attorney, would have present this case, so it's not, like a one size fits all by any means, but this is why I suggest you get liability insurance in the event something like that happens. Okay. So yes, so definitely, assess risk on a regular basis, especially if you're in charge on a management level. These are different strategies for risk management. Implement a risk management plan. Obviously training your staff is always going to be, key if you're in that position. A lot of the things we talked about, including health screening, equipment inspection, maintenance, and if you have all hands on deck, all eyes, obviously even as a person in management, you're not going to be there all the time. So if you could train your staff appropriately, then they can, be your eyes and ears when you're not there. Evaluation, okay, ongoing throughout the year. So formative is ongoing throughout the year. Summative is formal annual review of entire risk management plan. So any of the plans that you put in place, emergency plans, risk management plans, they need to be assessed at some point. No different than reassessing your clients for testing purposes. All right, I'm almost done, guys. Here, minimize. I mean, you could review these. Many of these things are pretty. Fitness testing, so yes, there's obviously some risk for any of this screening that you do, testing that you're going to do. But the pre-screening that you do is definitely going to reduce your risk during the testing. Yeah, so you guys could read. This stuff is pretty straightforward. I don't think that you'll have record keeping. Always record, especially at the time of emergency, okay? Make sure your emergency plan includes somebody that's going to keep a record as it's happening, okay? Because after the fact, everybody's going to be, so spent from the emergency that occurred that, memories get distorted. So if you have somebody recording in real time, it's going to make it that much easier. Okay, and then obviously store the records in a secure place. Okay, so that brings us to, now it's your call. Do you guys, it's 9:34. Do you want to go through this quiz or do you want me to just give you the answers and you can do this on your own? You tell me. Any thoughts, guys?
It doesn't make a difference to me.
Okay, the
Yes.
last thing, if you want to do the quiz, listen, if you want to stay on and do the quiz, I'll stay on with you guys. If not, you can hop off. But the last slide, there is a survey. So if you could just go and, go to WITS and take the survey and share your experience with, the lecture in the lab. Okay. Okay, so you want me to keep this up and you guys can go through this?
Yeah, let's go through it.
Okay, go for it. Just tell me when you want me to advance.
I'm good.
Okay, anybody need me to wait? No? Okay, slide 2.
I'm done.
Okay, you okay to advance, guys? All right, slide 3.
Done.
Okay, everybody good?
I'm done.
Okay, I'm advancing to the last one. Nope, sorry, pass. Right there.
Done.
Okay. All right, let me go. I'll give you guys the answers here. Hold on a second. Just gonna get that. I still have the lecture out. So don't. Give me a second. I thought I must have closed the document. Okay, so the first one, it started off right. Which of the following is not true regarding children and acute effects of exercise? Is that the first question, correct? I believe, correct? I have the right,
Yes.
that was it. Okay, so that should be A. All right, the second one too should be C. Strength per unit of cross-sectional area declines with age. 3 is A, true. Okay, B, I'm sorry, 4 is A, arterial sclerosis and atherosclerosis. 5 is C, 130/80. 6 is C, mastery experiences. 7 is C, pre-contemplation. 8 is A, cold, clammy skin. 9 was B, false. And 10 was A, true. Okay. All right, so just to recap, so what I'm going to do is reach out to Jay when we sign off here, and I'm going to mention that you guys would like to have a review on this Friday, 11 to 1 for you. It'll be 12 to 2 for me. And then on Tuesday next week from 6:30 to 8:30. Does that work?
Yeah, that works.
Yes. Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so Friday, we'll pick up where we left off from last Friday, 54 to the end, and then, Tuesday, we could do, I think Quizlet might be a good way to go for a review, because they have some good review, flashcards that we can go through. Okay? All right, guys, thank you for being so patient. I'm sorry about all the content that we had to get through, but this was, although I feel like it's not as as intense as some of the other lectures we had. It was just a lot of material. But thank you for your patience.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, have a great night, and I'll see you guys on Friday. You should get an email from Jay confirming with the link to the webinar, okay?
Sounds great. Appreciate it.
All right, take care, guys. Bye-bye.
You too.